Is it just me or that music is breaking up an awful lot? I'm not sure. How you doing, buddy?
Poor Jordan. Yeah, that was very skippy, and I don't know what happened there. That was an audio malfunction. Sorry about that, people. We do apologize for whatever happened.
Reminds me of the good old days when we were playing those vinyls, those 45s
Exactly.
and stuff.
The old
Yep.
Black Sabbath albums. How's it going?
Well,
We're good.
all right. Well, welcome to the third of our Q&As. I want this thing officially called Q&A with A&P. I know I requested that before.
That doesn't do you a whole lot of good. Hi, A. It's not you. You need.
IP?
You know. You
How
need.
many A&Ps are there in connection with the Fishing Canada show?
Well, I used to shop at A&P all the time.
Did you?
A&P.
I'll bet you did.
Aches and pains. We used to have aches and pains all the time.
All right. So the Q&As are very simple. You ask the questions. We will try and answer as many of them as we possibly can in the allotted time. And we will look forward to being stumped. I want something challenging.
Yeah. That'd be nice. That would be very, very nice. I'm going to go over, as we're waiting for some questions to come in. If you missed last week, Ange and I did a rapid fire question and answer to Gord Pizer. One word or two, like one or two situation, and the doc right there. And I'll go over these really quickly. What Gord's ideas were. So just to give everybody an idea if they missed it. And you can always go to our YouTube channel and go back and look at that one again. But I said to Gord, I said, ice fishing versus open water. Do you remember what he said, Ange?
He said open water.
Open water. He said it like that. I went largemouth versus smallmouth.
Smallmouth, he said.
Like that. Muskie versus pike.
He had to think about it, but he went to muskie.
Muskie was pretty quick. Crappie versus bluegill.
Crappie.
Yep, right. This is where we got him on, though. We said finesse versus power. And he went like, whoa.
I don't think he actually came clean on this one, did he?
He did. Yeah, I looked at it this morning. He ultimately went to power fishing. He said he's got some new techniques coming out in finesse that he hasn't been doing, but he ultimately went to power fishing. I said, if you can only use one type of fishing line, either monofilament, fluorocarbon, or braid with no combinations in there, which would you use? And very quickly, he said,
braid, I believe.
Yep. He said braid.
Hey, Calvin's got a question for us, so I don't want to lose this one.
Okay.
He says he's got an interesting question that he knows for a fact will stump us.
Well, what is it, Calvin? Is it there?
All right, Calvin, put her up, buddy.
You're on, Calvin.
I can see him now.
Oh yeah.
By the way, Calvin is one of the most articulate people involved in our web presence, our web platform. He responds to just about everything that we put up on our blogs, and I got to tell you, I look forward to reading his replies more than I do look forward to reading any of the blogs that are on there.
Look at this. That's not very nice. But anyways, look at this question. This is pretty good.
All right. So, Ange and Pete, if I put you both in a round room and told you to stand in a corner, what would you do? This is a serious question with a logic answer.
What I would do is I wouldn't listen to you, Calvin. I'd stand right in the middle and say, forget it. I'm not doing it. Right in the middle. So
let me see.
There's something there. He's got.
What would I do? In a round room, go stand in a corner. And you said what? You said you would. Well, you would do what you would do what you do to me. Don't listen to me.
I decline. I wouldn't listen to him, and I'd stand in the middle, right in the center.
Okay, you got us, Calvin. What's the answer?
He's going to type it in.
Now he's got to make one up because now he knows anything will work.
He said there's a logical answer. We got a DC wind. Do you think we'll be able to get back in the water? And the boat launches will be back open. We just put 2 posts up on fishingcanada.com as for Ontario boat launches being open. I'm not sure where you're from, but we're keeping track of the Ontario. We've asked people in those blogs and those pieces to let us know if you find out in Saskatchewan, if there's closures, let us know what's opening back up, et cetera, et cetera. So
New Brunswick is open, by the way.
all of New Brunswick, everything?
Wow. Boat launches.
Right, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
All boat launches, okay. Because there's so many in Ontario. Some are opening up on May 14th, some are May 15th, some are already open. So it's a bunch of variables. So you got to almost call the municipality if you can. Check out our 2 articles. We're trying to keep up on it as best we can. But and if you have any information for us, please get it to us. Please.
Calvin, the answer, Calvin says, stand anywhere along the wall. There is a corner where the wall and the door meet.
Okay, Calvin, let's knock him out of this conversation.
Let's move on.
Okay.
Alex wants to know, regarding the Gord Pizer conversation last week about catch and release, how is it better to catch and release 30 fish when you have a mortality rate of 30% when using live bait?
Right.
I don't think that's as much a question as it is a statement. I think what he's saying, right?
Right, exactly. It's kind of a stat or a fact, right? You can't compare that to keeping 6 fish in a way.
Well, no. I disagree with you. Okay,
100%, right?
If we have a 30% mortality rate on fish that are caught and released, I'm talking walleye, after using live bait, and let's assume that 30% is a good solid number that we can work with. If we have 30% mortality rate and we catch 30 fish, how is that better than just getting our limit of 6 fish and going home? Because you're going to kill, now you need to catch a few more than 30, probably about 45 in order for 30% to equate to 6. But regardless, I know where he's going with this. And it is a great point. And we debated this last week, and Gordon and I talked about it this Saturday on the radio show, or last Saturday on the radio show. The only thing that's certain is that they all stand a chance to survive. And on any given day, you might get all of them to survive, depending on how you handle them, right? And depending on circumstances. Depending
on how deep they take the bait, et cetera, like that, right? There's all kinds of little circumstances, like Ann said. Yeah. So you're killing 100% of the 6 that you take home or 4 that you take home for your limit.
Oh yeah, those are filleted good.
Yeah.
Good. Actually, Andrew Fishing, if you could only fish for one species ever again, what would you choose and why? Well, I think both of us are going to give you probably the same answer. I'll go ahead and call it bass. And the reason being, and that now bass is a pretty big category, by the way. Okay, when I say bass, I'm including all bass, because for me, it's just such a fun activity to go out hunting down and chasing down bass, and they do release extremely well. All bass release extremely well. That's another reason why I would make it bass. But I think more importantly, bass fishing is, to me, is more of it's a hunt, and it's like full contact activity. You're in it, and you're zigging and zagging, and it's just a lot of fun. So it would be bass.
Yeah, I'm totally the same as Ange. I mean, to get very specific, it would be largemouth bass, hands down, without a doubt. Largemouth bass for me. Same idea. It's the hunt. It's the there's so many varieties, and there's so many variables when you're out largemouth fishing. You can compare to any other species with me. I mean, the hunt is like the muskie guys. The muskie guys that are avid, they're hunting their fish. You know what I mean? So largemouth much easier to catch. You can catch more in a day, et cetera, et cetera. But you know what? To try and catch a 5-6 pound Canadian largemouth bass, that's a hard animal to track down, and it's always a goal of largemouth fishermen. So with so many ways of catching them, so many areas in the lake that they can be in, because they are probably the most diverse in taking up cover and structure, et cetera, et cetera. To me, it's such a game out there. Largemouth, hands down for me, without a doubt.
Yeah. Hopefully, we answered that. Favorite lure of all time. Wow. Big Bass Boys want to know favorite lure of all time. I'll let you start that one off. Wow.
You know what? I'd have to. Okay, I mean, I'm going to go back to largemouth bass fishing. It's my favorite species, so I'll say my favorite lure of all time in largemouth bass fishing would be jig and chunk, a jig and either the old style pork, which we used to use all the time, or now just a jig with a flipping jig with a piece of rubber on the back, like any kind of a chunk in the back. So jig and chunk, I just love fishing that, throwing that. It's not just a bait that drops down to the bottom and you work like that. You can swim a jig real fast. You can do all that kind of stuff. So I just love using a jig, and I love the bite on it. I love the way the fish hit it. I love everything about a jig. So I'll say a jig.
I've been looking around the room. I thought I might have one here. I usually have various samples around my desk here, but I don't have for some reason. Somebody cleaned them up. For me, it's Mighty Mo. And for those of you who aren't aware of Mighty Mo or who Mighty Mo is or what Mighty Mo is, it's a little mouse that we've been playing footsies with for the better part of the last 12 years, trying to get it on the market. It's a little topwater bait. It's a hollow body made with rabbit fur, and just the most incredible topwater bait that I have ever had the pleasure of using. It's just a fun lure to throw around, even when it's not catching fish. It's just a fun lure to be with, if that even makes sense to anybody. It's almost alive. And,
it does look alive, yeah. There's a good one here. Pete, watched your show last Saturday morning catching brook trout. Is there a difference between brook trout and speckled trout, or are the two names same fish? Go ahead, Ange.
Well, it's the same fish, although traditionally, brook trout, we refer to brook trout that are in, well, I shouldn't say that because it really varies. I mean, there's also coasters that can be associated with the word brook trout. It's the same fish.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. Whether it's a little wee tiny guy or a great big 8-pound, 10-pound coaster, it's a brook trout or a speckled trout.
Yeah. So it's a nickname. Basically, it's a nickname, I believe, right? It's like walleye pickerel.
Speckled trout is the official name, but brookie has just.
Yeah, I thought it was brook trout was the official name.
No, speck.
Really?
Speck. Yeah.
Okay. Now there is also a saltwater sea trout. It's called speckled trout.
Speckled trout. Speckled trout. Yeah.
Speckled trout too, and it looks pretty. It kind of looks like our brown trout almost.
Yeah.
Very, very sought after fish in the salt water, but that's a sea trout too. So there is that, and that sometimes gets mixed up a little bit in our. Yeah. As you can see with Ange and I right now, we kind of wonder what that was because I've never caught one, but I've seen a lot of them. So
doesn't matter what you call them; they are outstanding.
Oh yeah.
Fish.
I love brook trout, man. They are a fun fish.
Crazy
story, Ange.
Will you ever go on a tour across North America, like down to the States, across the country, and up to the other coast, and do a video series of what our travels across North America? Is that what the question is?
I think that's what they'd say, right? That's what they're saying. I would think a YouTube. That'd be a fun one. I'll tell you what. Man.
I'm in. Make it happen. I don't care.
Guys going down to the States, going down as far as Mexico or whatever, seeing if you can get across the border of Mexico, do some fishing there, come back the other East Coast, and then go. Oh my God, that'd be a riot. That'd be great.
How long would we need to do something like that?
Oh my God. You got to put fishing in between it, right? Your traveling is bad enough. Then you got to fish for at least a day per location. And you want to do more than that sometimes. If it's a good location, it'll take you 6 months.
What are the chances of you and I getting away for 6 months, by the way?
Let's make it happen. I know one guy that can make it happen for us. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. That'd be fun. That'd be a blast. Did I see something about the craziest fishing stories just up on the screen?
Yeah, one guy put up what is the craziest fishing story that you've had.
Let's do that one real quick, and then we'll get back to this one here. Craziest fishing stories. M. Cap wants to know craziest fishing stories. Holy smokes!
That's a weird one.
Where do you start?
I'd have to rethink. I'd have to come back to you, M. Cap, on another time with that one.
All right. Okay. Why don't we do this? Why don't we prepare for that one for next week's show?
Okay. Perfect.
We'll both do our version of the craziest story. We'll do a little research, and then we'll answer it next week.
Yeah, because we're not balking out of this. We'll give you an answer, but we probably have just together, Ange and I have some crazy stories. Then we got our own individually with your father, with your, whoever, your buddies. So there's lots of stories you'd have to go and try and think. I like the question though. I like that. I think it's a good one. It's a good challenge, and I think we can have some fun with that. I know I got some beauties. So
I just got a message in from Frank Guida. I guess he tried to get on here and he couldn't or something. I don't know.
Frankie.
Or maybe he's trying to get at the front of the line like he always does. So maybe I shouldn't answer it then.
He's here. Oh yeah, because he can't get you right now. That's hilarious. Oh God.
Regarding mortality rate on released fish, is whitefish caught in 80 feet not have a higher mortality rate than 30%? I have seen guys continuing to catch whitefish after the 2 limit and continue catching fish. Well, first of all, I'm not a scientist, although I like to think I am sometimes, but I can pretty much tell you there is not a fish on the planet that you can bring up from 80 feet with any kind of success release rate. I don't think, and maybe Pete, you can correct me on that, but 80 feet is 80 feet.
They say that lake trout will burp their way up, and when you see the bubbles come out, and you'll see that almost every time from their deep. They say that, but I don't know if it's been proven or not. But I know lake trout, and they say whitefish will do the same thing. So I don't know, but whitefish are one of the most, compared to a lake trout, even whitefish are so delicate. Like it doesn't matter where they come from. You just touch them in the net, and they're probably not going to release. It's scary how delicate they are.
And that's why I'm thinking, the answer to that would be you catch it from 80 feet, you keep it.
Yeah.
You get your 2 fish limit, you go home.
Yeah, or go fish lake trout somewhere, or whatever, change species, whatever. Yeah. For sure. I saw one. I saw a good one in their range. Yeah, sorry about that.
What about fishing economy?
What's that?
You want to do that one, Mark Bunnell?
Go for it.
Striper fishing and economy.
Well, yeah, go for it. That's a good one for you.
So Mark Bunnell wants to know. He says, I am from Nova Scotia, cottage in Port-Peak, and I fish stripers in economy, where we were filming last year. What did I think of the area and the experience on the Bay of Fundy? Wow. First of all, the experience on anywhere in the East Coast. I have yet to make a trip, whether it's Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI, Labrador. I've yet to make a trip that I didn't come back and for the next few weeks was still overwhelmed at the quality of people living in those provinces. To me, it's like stepping into another world. They are the people down there are just so different and so open and friendly, and yes, maybe we could even throw in there naive, but it's just such a wonderful experience to visit, whether you're fishing or just traveling around the place. So economy, the area of economy, the whole Midas Basin area that we fished for stripers last year, everywhere we went, it's the same. People are just all out of one mold. They're spectacular people. The fishing on the Bay of Fundy, it is so different than any other fishery that you'll ever experience. And I'll be honest with you, watching that tide, when you first get to the boat launch, we'll call it, where they put the boats in this particular fishery, when you first get there and they tell you that, we've got about a half hour, 45-minute wait before the water is high enough that we can go out. And then as you're taking that in, you see this tide coming in and filling up all the little nooks and crannies in the water in front of you, and it's just rising. And then you know that you've got 10 or 15 minutes to get the boat in and get out safely. That whole experience, that in itself, to me, is part of the adventure. It's part of the fishing, because it is really, really exciting. And you get through that, and then you get out there, and it's, my God, it's like going back. It's like Jurassic Park. The landforms, the islands, the coast, the shoreline. It's just like you're in another world. It's spectacular. If anybody listening that has never been to the East Coast to enjoy some of our incredible Canadian fishing down there, it's got to be a must do. It's an absolute must do, without question. Doesn't matter what the species is, Pete. It's irrelevant.
It's to the East Coasters, it's normal. To everybody else, it's exotic. It really is. It's a whole different world, and it's fantastic. And then, of course, the East Coast hospitality out there, you can't beat it. I got one here, Ange. It says, more specific, what is the weirdest, craziest catch you ever got? Now, I don't know about weird, but I got a story that Angelo, he'll remember once they start talking about it. It was one of my first trips with Fishing Canada, probably my first trip ever to the West Coast, to BC. And we were out doing a salmon thing and all that. And then we went out to do some halibut. And the boys were telling me all about halibut. I've never done it. Now, Ange was there, and I think Phil Morlock was there. And Phil was there, and Todd was on the camera. You people would know these guys, but it was a good team, a fun team to get together. So we get out there, and for halibut, you're right on the bottom. You are ground fishing, they call it. You've got big weights in the tide, and you're dropping this huge weight down with a chunk of meat and waiting for this halibut to hit. So we're using chumming reels. I don't know if they looks like a fly reel. I don't know if people know what a chumming reel is. It's a weird setup. I still don't know why they do it, but that's me. I just don't like it because it's a knuckle buster, and back in those days, they were really new. Anyways, long story short, boom, I set the hook. I go, oh boy, something's happening here, and it's in the tide. So I start reeling it in, and I said, there's something wrong here, guys. I don't know what this is. And Ange and Phil says, well, it's a halibut. That's what it is. It's different than any other fish you've ever caught. This is a flat fish. I said, okay, reel it in, and about 15, 20 minutes, and I'm saying, guys, they said, Pete, does it feel like a piece of plywood with an O-ring in the middle of it, and you're pulling up that piece of plywood from the middle like this? I said, yeah, just like that. That's a halibut. That's a halibut. And I'm calling bullshit to these guys, and I'm so pissed off because I think I know everything about fishing already as a young guy, and I don't know anything, obviously. So get it right to the surface, just a look down, and look around again. There's a rock about that big I caught off the bottom. Remember that, Ange? Like about a 10-pound rock. And these guys were laughing. They were making fun of me. And I said, I told you that wasn't a fish. And they were making fun of me. I think we have that. I don't know if it's on camera or not, but I think we've got that on camera. I've got a couple rocks in my day, actually. I've got a couple of big rocks. So I don't know how I do it, but I've done that. But the hook stuck in that big, stupid stone in the ocean. And I had to bring it up about 150, 200 feet.
And if I'm not mistaken, I might have even spelled you for a few minutes while you were getting a breather, if I remember correctly.
Maybe, because it was we're fishing 200 feet of water, right? Minimum 100 feet of water out there for halibut. Sometimes 200 and 300 feet of water. So we'll not think up. Oh my God! So that's one of my weirdest catches.
I was trying to think the weirdest catch. I mean, there's every one of the fish that I've ever made contact with, to me, has got its own personal. Wonderful story behind it, but to me, the weirdest one that I ever caught, the weirdest fish I ever caught, was the electric eel in the Amazon.
Oh, I remember that.
Remember that? And,
oh my God! And
so I've got this electric. We were fishing for peacock bass, and I got this electric eel on this little crankbait, treble hook little crankbait, and so. Our guides, as soon as they saw that it was an eel, like they were freaking out. We never caught one of these things before. Anyways, we knew there was something weird going on. Couldn't understand them. They were freaking out pretty good, but they got the boat to shore and jumped in the water because we needed to get this eel. And this eel was like 4 feet long. It wasn't a little eel. It was a big fat 8 feet. It was like. It was scary just looking at it.
Oh yeah.
So, anyways, they jump and now they're laughing, but it's a nervous laugh, and they're splashing around, and this eel's crawling around and doing stuff, and I don't remember, Pete, whether they had pliers or.
No, you had it snagged in the back.
That's it.
And as you had a big machete you wanted to cut the hook off the skin off the fish. You wanted to cut it somehow.
That's right. And he was nervous and giggling and jumping around, and he's standing in the water, right? Now we still don't know that this is an electric eel.
No, we think it's an eel. That's all.
Big ugly. It is a big fat ugly eel. And we never picked up on the electrical part, right? So anyways, so he's with this machete. He's trying to get and I guess he made contact in the wrong place, and he got a shock. It was the funniest thing. That's when we knew there was something different about this eel.
That machete went about 3 feet in the air. He was doing one of these things like that, and boom, and just the machete flew. And as you jumped back, screamed, we all laughed. Then we realized what it was. That was electric. top of that, but he was so cautious of getting that machete to try and pop that hook off, and the steel through the wood. It was a wooden handle, but you remember the steel blade that goes around the outside of it a lot. It was an old machete, so it was probably a homemade one in the Amazon. They probably got some rivets in the middle of it too. Oh my God, he got hit with that. And those things are like thousands of volts, like 10,000 or. It's a ridiculous amount of voltage that electric eel, no amperage, but
how does it not travel through the water though? How does that electricity not, like, you know what I mean?
It's like DC voltage. The DC voltage doesn't go through the water.
Yeah.
I don't know how that works, but
how does it even produced?
Yeah. Oh yeah, they're an amazing creature. They are an amazing creature. You know what I mean? But I'll tell you what, when he got hit with that, that was the craziest. Yeah, you're right. That was a crazy catch because we didn't realize it, and as soon as he hit it, oh my God, it was hilarious. So he got jolted.
Don wants to know, what do you do if your boat breaks down in the middle of the lake and you have no cell phone? What is the best course of action to take?
Nice, good question. I mean,
well, you have no cell phone. First of all, I don't know how that's even possible today, but let's go with that.
It died. Let's say it died and you don't have a charger on it.
It died. And unlike FNC1, I'm assuming you have no VHS radio either, right? No other communication type of radio.
VHS would be a good way if you have that, obviously.
Yeah. Which we do. So short of that, what is the best course of action to take? Well, now, you're talking to me now. I'm going to tell you what I would do. The first thing I would do is put the electric motor down, because it can't both go. You can't be, dead in the water with your outboard and your electric motor dead too. I mean, that would be like writing a Hollywood script. So I would use the electric motor to try and get me in somewhere, assuming that there's some kind of shoreline that I can sort of hook up to visually. If not, if I've got no electric motor and no shoreline, I'm going to assume that I at least have the safety requirements, which is a paddle. And I would certainly try and use the paddle and the wind and the current in unison to see if I could get anywhere near some shore. Any shore would do, I guess. That's my answer. What's yours? What would you do?
The first thing you always do, I've learned this one through trial and error and through a lot of mistake, is check your kill switch. Okay.
Oh, by the way, the Countess just brought me my coffee.
Yeah, I forgot about it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Check your kill switch, because so many times, as I've had it happen, I had it happen last year when we were up at Lac Sewell. Remember that, Ange? There was a mishap, and I was heading towards the island because I had an electric motor early. But so check your kill switch, number one. If you have a bigger boat, you're required to carry flares on your bigger boat. So if you have a bigger boat and you have flares, obviously you pop a flare off, you're in real trouble. You can try what Ange was saying with the electric motor, because if you can do that and you get in, then you don't bother anybody. But the last case scenario is you got to pop a flare off. The other thing I was going to do last year when I thought I was stranded and I was heading out of battery power, and Jordan on this right now, he was with me. I was heading to a shore and I knew I had a lighter and I was going to make a fire and try and put up a signal, on a point. We looked for a real grassy point where it wouldn't catch the forest on fire. This is Northern Ontario, Lac Sewell. And I was going to start a fire, and hopefully that Ange and Steve Nizwicki would see the smoke coming up or a fire. They take bombing around and go, oh my God, there he is. Because I couldn't get the motor, I couldn't start. The little electric I had was against the wind. Everything was going the wrong way, but it ended up, it was the kill switch halfway down and it wouldn't start the motor back up. So flares, paddles, electric motor, get to shore as quick as you can. If you can start a fire, light a fire, if you can do that, I guess that's what you do, right?
Yeah, there's so many variables to that question, though. For example, if you've got another boat with some buddies that you are sort of on the lake with, and like Pete said, some kind of signaling device. If you have safety equipment on the boat, you're going to have a flare. I don't know.
Little mirrors too. The mirrors in the kit. And there's
Yep.
a flashlight in the kit. With that mirror, you can flicker it if you see somebody to get that, shine that on them. That's all part of the kit too. So
yeah, I guess the most important thing is to do something. I don't think just sitting there in panic is going to solve anything. You have to
put on your PFD too. If you're not wearing it, you should be wearing it. But if you're not wearing it, put it on right then and there when you're in trouble. Because if something else gets worse and worse,
Who wouldn't have their PFD on nowadays?
About 90% of the population fishes right now.
You had to remind me of that, didn't you?
I'd say.
Um,
For what's that now? For a fish fry, what's your go-to fish to feed the masses? Wow.
Before you get to that, Mike, our very own Mike Mooring just piped in. He said, "Don't forget, you also caught a beauty rock on Lake St. Francis."
Well, that's what I said. I've got a couple rocks. So thank you, Michael. I did mention that, but you're right. Lake St. Francis, dragging the Carolina. Oh, what is this? A man says, you got a muskie on it. I says, buddy, this muskie's pretty heavy. It's a rock. I'm the best rock star fisher ever. Okay. The go-to fish for sure, we're going to feed a bunch of people. We do shore launches up north a lot and all that. And that 16 to 18 inch walleye is the perfect fish. If it's legal, whatever your length limits are.
Don't forget pike.
Yeah. That's I was going to say that next. That's one of those fish that in those areas where walleye is very prominent. When you come down into southern Ontario, and maybe walleye are hard to catch, and they have pike in the lake, and you know how to clean pike, do the pike, because they're smaller pike, or you're kind of culling out those little nasty bait stealers anyways in that sense, and they taste as good as walleye. So pike and walleye are still fantastic. Now, of course, panfish, but you're going to clean 1 billion panfish to feed a bunch of people. But if you could have a fish fry of perch, yellow perch, or crappies, that's pretty damn good too.
I remember years ago, I participated in a thing called the Rock Bass Jamboree.
Yeah.
Up at Hay Lake.
Yeah.
And they were tasty. Rock bass are tasty.
Good. All those
any of those panfish, anything that you can catch and cook up, it's going to be tough to clean and fillet and get the bones out and all that stuff, whatever you're doing. But they're all tasty. They're great, especially if you've got a big group.
I had a chat with George Pern the other day about it, and we agreed on the same thing. As far as panfish are concerned, yellow perch is our favorite, and bluegill is our second. I don't know if people have ever eaten sunfish, but bluegill in particular, my God, they are so good. To me, they're better than crappie by far. They're a nice, sweet meat like perch, and they're when you get them bigger, you get an 8 or 10 inch bluegill, 10 by 10s we call them. You've got, all you need is about 6 of those per person, and you've got yourself a feed with the fixing. So. By
the way, you knew Calvin was going to pipe in on the electric eel thing, right?
It's got 14,000 too. Oh yeah, there it is. Okay.
Shock of up to some 5,000 to 6,000 stacked electroplaques can make a shock of up to 860 volts and up to 1 ampere of current. There you go.
Wow, where did you get that from?
Who knows? Doesn't matter. He can make stuff up, and I believe it.
I know you would.
I love it.
Melvin fan ever.
Thanks, Kelvin. When will the Fundy Stripers be on YouTube? I have some American fishing YouTube channels that want to see it. Okay, so I thought it was already on YouTube.
No, not that one. That's this year's show. It won't go on until next year. We keep our current shows airing through the year on television, so we don't bastardize those ones, and then we put them on the following year. So anything in the past is going on the YouTube now, but that one will not go on until the new season starts of Fishing Canada, which should be January. So just to let you know on that one.
Larry Lazur wants to know, what do you think?
But it will air again on Fishing Canada. Tell them that, so maybe they can get it somehow. Like, it will air again. So.
Right.
By
the way, didn't we ask people, when we first, the very first week we did this show, did we not ask people to give us their opinion as to whether we should be putting the current broadcast episodes on YouTube at the same time and just say the hell with it and not worry about protecting the broadcast part of it?
I don't know if we asked that or not, but it's a good question to ask right now. I'm sure
we did ask. And then I forgot that we asked because we wanted to get an idea of what people think of that. There's that Saturday morning viewing of the Fishing Canada show to some people is you can't mess with it because it's almost sacrilegious. It's what we do in this country. We've been doing that for almost 40 years.
Yeah.
So taking that away might be a little harsh, but making it available to people who don't necessarily consume our product on television, making it available at the same time on YouTube or on our site, would there be anything wrong with that? That's the question that we asked. And
that's a good question too, because you know what? There's a lot of people now that don't have TVs. They don't even watch TV anymore, right? So you're not going to lose those guys because they're not on TV to watch your audience. So you've got a lot of hardcore television audience that's still there. We know that by looking at the numbers, right? Yeah. So it might not hurt anything. I don't know. It's a good one. Give us an opinion if people want to, pipe in or send us on the socials. Give us an opinion on that one.
What's your opinion? What do you think?
It scares me. That one scares me in that, by putting it on, do we drop our numbers? Because I think our sponsors want us to be on television too, right? And then they want to get as high numbers as they can but then again, they want to get those extra views on social. So it just scares me a little bit. Yeah. But we're old guys, we're old school, and the new.
Whoa! What do you mean, old guys?
I'm looking at you right now, and I'm saying, my God, he's not getting younger every day.
We'll throw it out there.
Yeah.
But the way we've been doing it for the last several years, it airs first, and then at the end of that season, that broadcast season, it goes to the internet. So, what else we got up here?
I haven't been really looking here, so I've been kind of yapping too much. And in the meantime, what else do we got? Okay, Angelo's looking there. We got one guy. We got a bunch of people asking when they're going to open the borders. Ange and I don't know when we're going to open the borders. I mean, there's a May 21st. Trudeau was talking about it again today. May 21st is the number, is the date that they have. They're constant talking back and forth with the U.S., but we don't. That's the kind of stuff we don't know exactly. Whatever you guys hear in the news, we hear in the news as well. So just to let everybody know about that.
TC Sports wants to know, how can muskie rods be 7'8", heavy, fast, and different in line weight? Oh, it keeps moving on. Oh, there you go.
There you go.
10.45 with ½ ounce to 2 ounce for some, and others are 48 with lure. So what he's saying is the same rod. How can it be labeled?
Same rod length. Yeah. Same rod length, same action.
Well, okay. So rod blanks, or a furrow, as it's called, they're all different in construction. And they may look the same, they may have the same length, they may have the same diameter, but totally different personalities and makeup. And that's what makes all of the different actions that we've got in rods. And muskie rods are no different. Just because they all feel like a broomstick, they're designed for very specific uses. And in this case, what you're looking at here is a difference between a light and a medium, or a medium heavy, between those two lure sizes and weights. But don't let the appearance fool you. Most manufacturers, I would say all manufacturers today, use completely different lengths, same length, same diameter, but completely different lengths when designing rods for different specific reasons, like in this particular case.
And there's different ingredients, right? There's IM6, 7, 8, 9 graphite. There's different types of graphite too that and composites, etc. I mean, composites maybe not so much, but there's different materials, and they're all trying to source. I'm sure some companies are inadvertently hitting the same Chinese manufacturer, if it is, or whatever it is, but then they're all trying to get something different too. You know what I mean? So some of these companies out there, St. Croix is a great one for muskie. You know what I mean? They, I'm sure they're really looking for the best of the best, but all blanks are different, and then all actions are different. You really got to read that, and they're pretty accurate. When they write that on that rod, they have a 40 to 80 pound test, 2 to 12 ounce lure. You don't want to throw a 1 ounce over that. That's for sure. So,
well, here's one. Janice wants to know: have we fished on the Red River in Manitoba?
We talked about that last week. The last time when you stuck a hook in your leg.
Yeah.
Right.
And my leg. No, both.
That's right.
Two separate instances, thumb and their chin. Yeah, Red River, Manitoba. It's fantastic. It's known for its catfish fishing. The channel cats, they're massive and abundant and fun and strong, and they just tear you up. However, having said that, it's also home to the greenbacks, the famous giant walleye of Manitoba, and it also has one of the best kept carp fishing secrets on the planet. On the upper part of the Selkirk Dam is some of the best carp fishing known to man. So the Red River's got a lot going for it, man.
That, like Ann said, the well, those cats are crazy. But in the fall, those big greenbacks come in, and we're talking big walleye that come in that river system, like 10+ pounders, and a lot bigger than 10. And that's such a cool looking fish. The greenback, it's got this iridescent green along the back instead of our darkish gray or whatever we have for most walleyes everywhere else in the world. They have this green hue tinge to them, and it's just incredible to see. When you get one, you say, "Oh my God, that's a greenback! That is so cool!" And they're real stocky, beefy. Red River is a fantastic fan. And what was the little fish that we caught and we used for bait on the cats too? Gold. There's full of those too, and now you can actually fish for them, and have some fun too. So your kids, take the kids out there, catch all the goldeye, all those little panfish, and you cut them up, and you catch the big catfish. It's a very cool fishery.
We're not ignoring this one. I just lost sight of it the last time I looked at it. And it's about the rule changes in Zone 11, where bass opens the same time as walleye. Are you aware of it, Pete?
No. What do you think about changes? Oh,
Zone 11.
Zone 11. Is that the Sault Ste. Marie Algoma one?
Yeah.
I think it's in that area where they have changed it in the last couple of years. If I'm not mistaken, I'll just go with that as a fact that there's a dividing line. You have to look on it because it's very specific. I don't know if that's 10 or 11, but anyways, there's a very specific area that just opened in that region that they open for bass, and you got to watch. It's not just the zone itself. There's a specific line in the zone for opening bass. I think, you know what, especially in northern Ontario, I mean, the farther north, just above that, they had it open all year, all the time. So now they're just bringing it down further south, right? So now they brought that down in the Algoma. And any of the Algoma guys I've talked to love it. They're catch and release guys because they have so many walleye, and they have steelhead and all the salmon species in the St. Mary's that they got lots of other fish they can eat too. So they're just using bass more as a sport fish than anything now. I mean, for the ministry to open it up, is it necessary? You're fishing spawning fish, etc. We talked about that before. You got to be your own liquor control board there. You got to really watch what you're doing and know what you're doing. And hopefully if you see some yahoos out there killing fish when they're not supposed to be, you report it. So.
By the way, it looks like we've got a May 14th for Rice Lake boat launches to open.
Yeah. Okay. Rice Lake. Okay, good.
Okay.
Good.
So that's confirmed.
Yeah.
Favorite fly-in lake and lodge.
Wow.
Favorite fly-in lake and lodge.
That's interesting.
We're gonna piss somebody off here. Wherever we don't mention, right?
I'll tell you what we can do on this one. We can go more generic. We can go, if you're going to BC, Northern Rockies Lodge is the best one to go to. How's that? Because we've been there. I think it's the only lodge we've ever been to over there to fly in. It's a drive-to lodge, but you fly into every fishing location that you're there for. So it's a fun.
Even that though, I mean, even that there's great lodges in BC that we've been to that would qualify.
Oh, the coast. I mean, I'm thinking of the inland stuff. Yeah, the coast stuff is like
out of this world. But anyways, I guess maybe they're looking for that real favorite, that little gem that you know what mine is? As bizarre as this sounds, because I got some issues with this place. One particular issue, but Hasty Lake for bass.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm telling you, if there is a lake that I enjoy flying into more than any, I mean, we've been to every place, right? They're all fantastic, but the anticipation of touching down on a Hasty Lake and knowing that the only game fish in that water is bass, and knowing that there's nobody else on the lake for the whole time that you're there, that's a guarantee because there's only one way in, one way out, and one cabin.
Yeah.
It's Hasty, man.
Wow, you did surprise me on that one. I thought you were going to go with Lodge 88 because of the amenities, because of how the big fish, plus it's sort of like the cleanest of clean and the et cetera, you know what I mean? So that's where I thought you were going to go with that. I love Hasty. By the way, Hasty Lake is, if you want to know about it, it's Lausanne Aviation. So if you type in Lausanne Aviation, you're going to see one of their trips. They have many lakes. One of their trips is at Hasty Lake. It's a 5-minute flight, 10 minutes if they give you a tour. Otherwise, it's just 5 minutes. It's off Lake Lausanne and over the hill, and then drop into Hasty Lake. It's a cool little place. Very small, rustic cottage that you have to bring your own gear in with everything you bring in, all your food, your beer, everything else. It is there's what you call an outhouse there. Angelo's favorite. That's his issues with he's got there. So you got to be prepared. There's an outhouse only.
Am I the only person who hates going into an outhouse?
So, here's the way you got to look at it. You're probably the only person watching here that would say, if I can have world-class bass fishing, I got no problem taking a dump in an outhouse every morning. No worries about that. So that's what you got to compare it to, you know what I mean? You wouldn't do it here, but if you're going to go get some great fishing, don't worry about it. Just do it.
But, as I said, we'll piss a lot of people off by picking one. We've been blessed with the opportunity to visit just about every wonderful operator in this province and most of the country. And so it's pretty hard to just pick one. But I just threw that out there because it was different. I mean, who could say anything bad, Pete, about Hawk Lake?
About that.
It's another spectacular place. So,
we're too privileged in going to too many places.
We're spoiled.
Choices. We're spoiled. You know what I mean? So we have so many choices. Let's just say that almost every fishing lodge we've gone to, there's not been very many dumps. I will have to say that. There's, even if they're rustic, there's always something great about it. It's the adventure in. The fishing is usually fantastic in all these places. You know what I mean? So that's a tough question. That's you throw a wrench on us by that one for sure.
Pim Island. Who wouldn't go back to Pim Island?
Pim Island is rough as it gets. Big giant pike on those giant tubes that Andrew was throwing out there. So I mean, it's a lot of these, like Pim Island is a classic example. It's one cabin out there. You bring everything again that you have in there, and these cabins have separate bedrooms, but the only thing separating them is the walls. There's no roof. There's no roof on the bedrooms. So the snorers are right beside the non-snorers, beside the others there. You can hear everything. When you get up in the morning, when the Ange gets up in the morning and put the pot of coffee on, everybody hears it no matter what. You know what I mean? So it's not like it's quiet or anything like that, but the fishing is so outstanding. And it's the trip in there, right? It's the trip going to these places. It's the flight in and then flying over that beautiful aerial view of the North Country in the world, whatever part of the world you're in, or the country you're in, I guess, in Canada. And it's all just part of the whole package. And you come out of it with great memories and great fishing, no matter where.
I want to also throw this in because Pete said we're blessed, we're spoiled, we're lucky, we're fortunate, and we do it for a living. I mean, we could throw all kinds of different reasons why we've been able to experience, if not all, certainly most of the great operations in this country. But I do want to throw this out there to anybody who has not ever experienced a fly-in before in their life. You have to do one. It doesn't matter which one you do. You just have to do one. A fly-in trip is so different than anything else that you'll ever experience all of your life. That everybody that loves the outdoors and loves fishing, absolutely sometime. And listen, it's not for everybody. They're not cheap. Even the low end one is not cheap. There's money involved, but everybody joining us today, I'm sure, is worth that one fly-in trip, that one time where they say, hey, I'm going to spend the money and go, because it will change you completely. It'll change you in every possible way you can imagine. You'll come out of it a different person for sure. So.
For sure. Got one here. I'm not sure if Tim Sturgeon has one. It says hat. It might be, what clip do you use to attach a weight onto your line to drop a lure down? An example.
Right. You guys were flipping weights on that walleye show a couple of weeks ago.
Snap weights. Yeah, they're basically called snap weights, Tim. And all they are is a little clothespin clip, a very tight clothespin clip that you snap onto your line. It's got a little wee tip, or little tit in the end of that, inside the clip, so that you put it over top of your line so that it doesn't come out. I'll think of the name of the company by the time I'm done this thing, who makes them. And then you have a big split ring on there, and you basically put on whatever weight you want to put on. So we'll have 3/4 ounce, 1 ounce, 2 ounce, 3 ounce weight. You can vary them. Most guys have a set of weights that they don't have to play around with and putting them on. But basically, you've let out your 50 feet of line, 70 feet of line. Snap this little snap on. It's got a weight hanging down. Then you let out some more line, and it drops it down that much more. So I'll figure the name of the company out, and you can look it up online.
You can also get some more sophisticated ones that I've seen, a little more expensive, where you can adjust the tension on that clip. It has rubber surfaces on it, much like a downrigger clip, where you can actually adjust the tension on it. So depending on what you want to go. There's a million different things that you could, you probably have in your garage that you could use that would work just as well.
Yeah.
Too, by the way.
I'm going to look it up. While you're talking, Andrew, I'm going to look up because I have to get that company now for Tim.
What was that last one that was up there, Jordan? Can you put that back up? No? All right. The hell with you, Jordan. I don't
He'll get you. He'll do it. He'll get you.
It was just there. Let's see. Can you talk a little bit about float fishing? Lake, what fish, etc. I'm from Europe and I really miss it. Here you mostly are using spinning, pike, walleye, trout. I'm assuming you're talking about float reels. Oh, yeah. I'm assuming you're talking about float reels. I hope you are, anyways, because I mean, float fishing. You could also be talking about using a float tube to get out fishing. But I'm going to go with the premise that you are talking about a reel, a float reel, or a single action, a center pin reel. They're not as common in this part of the country, although hardcore steelheaders and salmon fishermen, for that matter, will swear by them. They're mostly a West Coast thing, and they are a great way to fish. It just eliminates some of the mechanism, the gearing that you have in conventional spinning gear, and it's more of a one-on-one kind of battle with the fish. Although some float reels are really starting to get sophisticated as well, and expensive, by the way. I think Islander reels are probably at the close to the top end of that category. But they're great. It's the single action reel, totally different concept than spinning. And it's more direct between you and the fish. I think it's probably the biggest difference.
And the beauty, I mean, we'll carry on with this a little bit more, but the beauty of a float reel, the reason the guys are using float reels nowadays, for people that don't know it, if you're fishing spinning gear, you open and you cast out your float and let it drive. You got the nice rod and everything's set up perfect. And you're letting that float, you're following the float down at the normal speed of the current. That's all fine. But if you want to get a further drift, you would literally have to open your bail and let your line flop out. Well, that right there is going to cause an issue because you have to close your bail, you have to react, you have to do all that kind of stuff. With a float reel, they just lob it out there, they go down, and this reel is just basically back reeling. They have such perfect bearings in them that it's back reeling out the line. It's actually laying the line out as the current's taking it. It's a really ingenious way of fishing. They are getting the best presentation of anybody on the river. I'll guarantee it, because it's the perfect speed at the current. What these trout are doing. Imagine the weights that they got on there too. I don't do it. I've never done it before, but I love watching these guys do it because they're so good at what they do. So that's the big thing about a float reel is the presentation. Then when Ann says, now when you got one-on-one, you see them spinning the reel and they're setting the hook. You put your hand on it, you set the hook, and just stop it. It's an art in itself, but it looks fun. Now the other thing, he might be talking just about float fishing, and he says, I'm from Europe and I really miss float fishing, and so usually spinning on pike, walleye, and trout. People still float fish. I mean, Ange and I still we run slip bobbers on many species of fish, but walleye, we're going on a walleye hump, and sometimes you run a little jig head under a slip bobber on a hump, and you want to get it at 12 feet deep or something like that. We'll use that technique all the time. I mean, if it is a great way of presenting a bait at a certain depth. So a float fishing and pike, and our best pike day ever.
Forgot about our best pike experience in our lives was with a float, right?
Saskatchewan. It was on Tobin Lake, and we were throwing big slip floats, and we were throwing giant baits, frozen saltwater bait for pike. They throw it out there, let the float take movement, and then all of a sudden your float's sitting there, right, and all of a sudden, boom, like that. Oh, shit, that hook. We had a riot doing that. It was the best pike fishing I've ever had in my life, and it was with floats. So we still use it every now and then.
I think the best way, if that's what you're asking, I think the best way to answer it is that float fishing it's a part of fishing.
Yeah.
We use it when we have to. There are times where you absolutely have to have a float to get the right presentation to the fish, and that works. So it's just part of the overall. I think people who are using floats exclusively, like a lot of European anglers do, the problem with it becomes too one-dimensional. And you get too locked into that mode, and that's all you can do. The beauty about having an open book and not being locked into anything in particular is that you're allowed to use the best possible tool under those circumstances at any given time, and a float is just part of that.
Yeah. I actually did a carp show in Woodstock on the Woodstock Pond with Len Purdick. We used floats exclusively. We threw these little pin floats out with a little piece of corn underneath it, and it was the way of catching carp there. So, Len or Ange, you got to see Mick Anderson there. G'day, lads, watching from Australia. Hey, Mick, I love it. He just said g'day in there. It's part of one of the comments. So
yeah, we had somebody from Australia last week as well. That's kind of cool.
Awesome. Hey, Mick, how you doing, buddy? Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it, man. That is awesome.
What a country that is, huh?
I'd like to catch a barramundi, Angelo. That's my fish I want to catch down there is a barramundi. I think those things are like a steroided tarpon / bass, everything else. That's one of the fish on my list for sure.
We have also been blessed, both of us, at shooting episodes in Australia and New Zealand. Fantastic.
Beautiful part of the world. Beautiful part of the world. So,
what do we got? Tim Sturgeon, Lac du Bonnet in Manitoba, Winnipeg River.
Well, Winnipeg Rivers, I mean, that's world class, right? That is a world class. I mean, Lake Winnipeg, Winnipeg River. I've never fished Bonnet, but that whole area north of the Winnipeg River, north of Lake Winnipeg and all that, Manitoba has some wicked good angling of a lot of different species of fish. I mean, for those people that are elsewhere from them other than Manitoba right now, I'm telling you what, Manitoba is very much known for its fishing. It's the locals there are hardcore. Every time we go there, everybody fishes in that whole province. It's unbelievable. It's part of their life. They hunt, they do it all, and justifiably so, because they have every species: pike, walleye, lake trout. They have smallmouth bass. I don't think they have largemouth. They have smallmouth bass. They have all the trout. I think it's a fantastic God's River, big brook trout, right? So
I would really highly doubt that they don't have largemouth, and the only reason I say that is because we found largemouth in Saskatchewan, found largemouth in BC. I would really be shocked if somebody hasn't influenced largemouth in those other provinces like Manitoba and Alberta. It's just that we haven't found them yet, right?
Yeah, on the southern border, maybe. By the way, I don't know if it's been known or not, but I know there's carp in BC now because Vic Carroll was out kayaking yesterday with his wife, and he sent me videos of all these carp they're in there spawning in the shallows right now. Tons of them in there, going nuts. So
whoa.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. They're invasive, right? But I told him, buddy, you're not going to get rid of them, so you might as well start fishing for them. So
I've already getting a lot of people saying, "Yeah, we should go on the YouTube broadcast," and we're getting some saying, "Don't mess with it." So
Calvin said, "Don't break a good thing."
Still mixed.
Favorite trophy walleye fishery in Ontario?
Trophy
walleye fishery. Well, that's pretty.
Is money an issue?
Well, you know what? You can go with I'll do the obvious. To me, it's still the Bay of Quinte, because it's just, if I'm looking for a 10-pound plus walleye, I'm going to go to the Bay of Quinte or Lake Ontario joining together. I know Lake Erie is good too, but I don't know it well. So if that's for my favorite, I'm going to say the Bay of Quinte and Lake Ontario both, because I've got two 14-pounders, 14 pluses out of the Bay of Quinte. Those are gigantic fish. If you've ever seen a 14-pound walleye, it's like nothing other you've ever seen. It's ridiculous how big they are. I've got so many 10s and 12s that are there that I couldn't get away from that. And it's getting tougher and tougher all the time, but it's still the place to go, for me, in my opinion, if you want a big, giant walleye. So,
on the other hand of that scale, if money is not an object and you want to make it an adventure in catching your personal best walleye, how can you not go to Hawk Lake?
Yeah.
I mean, how can you not go to Hawk Lake in northwestern Ontario?
So, you know what? Those are two great choices because they're so opposite. There's opposite in geographic locations, and they're opposite in body waters. The Hawk Lake Angel says small lake, Quinte's giant. So yeah, and you have a good crack at a 10 at Hawk too. A real good crack at a 10 on Hawk.
And I'm sure there's a multitude of great bodies of water with giant walleye in between.
Oh yeah, yeah. Our favorite. So
you asked our personal favorites, so those would be them.
Yeah.
Best bait for smallmouth bass fishing off a dock.
Casting it off the dock?
Well, yeah, I specifically wants to go off the dock. By the way, you know, when you say off the dock, I'm in the middle of writing this piece about bass and bass habitat and bass migration and feeding and this whole thing.
Just that piece that you've been working on for 6.5 months now?
Yes, sir. It's coming. I spent another couple hours on it yesterday.
Okay, good.
And docks are part of it because obviously docks are fish magnet and in particular a bass magnet. And so when you say off a dock, you know, first thing that comes to mind, oh wow, this guy wants to fish off a dock. But you know, at the end of the day, we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, we being bass anglers, in order for us to go fish docks in some cases. Think about that, right? Hundreds of thousands of dollars in bass boats and equipment to go fish bass under docks. So when you say docks, yeah, don't look at it as just a waste of time. Docks are a bass magnet. For me, smallmouth bass off a dock would, and I know I said this last week about something else, but it's the truth. There are very few baits, and I could probably name the few, but there are very few baits that be as effective as a Senko or a shad-shaped worm. Either one, depending on the water clarity and depending on the depth, but either a Senko right off a dock, probably wacky rig, so I could drop it straight down and just let it do its thing around the dock, or a drop shot shad-shaped worm. That would be it for me.
I'll elaborate. I agree with Angelo 100%. Both those baits. If I would only choose one, I'd probably choose the Senko, and it would be a 5-inch or 4-inch Senko, not the 5. I'd do a 4-inch because I get an all-rounder, and it would be probably that greenish pumpkin green, in that a green tone, a darker green tone, and wacky rig is probably the way to go on it. The problem with the Senko wacky rig is you need a bunch of them because you can rip it in half because they get bit by everything. That bait will get bit by everything and it'll rip. So you're going to need a couple of packs, 3 packs. But the other thing about what Ann says is so true. You drop it straight down the dock. So you can fish the actual dock if it's a nice deep dock and there's not and lots of cover around it like that. Otherwise, if it's an open dock with not much cover around it, the fish will spook out a little bit if there's a lot of people on it. But you always try that. But the beauty of a Senko is that I would throw it unweighted too. I'd throw it with no weight on it. I'd have it so just throw it out there and let it just drop so slow. And then you sort of fan cast off the dock, working it back really slow, lifting, let it drop. The other thing about a Senko is you throw it out and dead stick it. Just let it sit on the bottom. So it's just sitting there. This little 4-inch Senko just laying there, and you have no idea about the fish's world. You think there's no way they're going to see that, even though there's weeds. They see that. I don't know what it is. They can smell it too with a Senko. But if you just throw that bait out, sit there on your dock, have your beer, do whatever you're doing there, and then enjoy talking to people, and all of a sudden you're going to see that line just go taking off, and that thing will pick up that Senko. So it's a deadly bait.
And I'll just add this to what you're saying, Pete. If your dock has got relatively large spacing between the platform or the boards, and when I say relatively, I mean, a half-inch or more, or better yet, if it's an older dock and there are some broken pieces where you've got half a board missing, et cetera, et cetera. This is one thing that dock fishermen always overlook when they're fishing their own dock. Just sneaking up, walking across that dock quietly is not going to prevent you from spooking those fish. Because if you're fishing it at high noon and you've got sun directly overhead, keep in mind that sun is beaming down between those cracks. By you walking across, you're alerting those fish because they see that light being it's like spooking. It's like spooking a fish when you're walking a bank. They'll see it. So in a case like that, at high noon, and you've got a dock that's got wide open cracks, fish it from the side. What Pete was just saying about throwing a unweighted wacky rig Senko, just pitch it out from the side of the dock so you're not walking directly on top. It'll make a huge difference in your hookup ratio because you are spooking fish, not the panfish, not the small bass. I'm talking about the big guy that lives in there will be spooked by you walking across the top and causing that light disturbance on in his world. So just one of those little things that you should keep in mind.
As you go on to the next one, I'm going to look for a color that I can recommend too, and we can go back to that too.
Well, you guys get a fish without a camera recording? Great question. Great question. So I will say this. I can't give you numbers, but I will say that in the early part of our career, a lot. In the latter part of our career, not as many. And why? Because we now have developed the uncanny ability, no matter how tempting it is, no matter how good it looks, no matter how the moment is there, we will not make a cast until we get the thumbs up from our camera people. Because we know, we've learned after years and years of the camera not running and we getting the fish of a lifetime and all that, we just don't do it anymore. As hard as that might seem to most people, and it is hard, by the way. You know, when you come cruising around a point, you're on the electric motor and you just come around that point and there it is, that one piece of wood that's just so perfectly sitting there coming offshore, and you know there's a fish there. And your first instinct as an angler is, let me get in there. No, we don't do that now. We look back, see how the cameraman's making out, and then we'll wait. And sometimes we'll wait.
That's so true. That is so true. It kills us to wait too, but it's true.
Or if they have to do a battery change.
Oh, that's the worst.
With whatever mics need to be changed, we'll hunker down and we'll wait. We'll wait. So, but the first years, I would say the first 10 to 15 years, man, we missed fish after fish on camera because all we wanted to do was fish, right?
Yeah. That guy, go back to that Senko color. I wanted to get a number for him. I'm saying pumpkin. It's green pumpkin with a black flake. It's as good as anything out there. It's a little bit contrast. It's a number 297.
That's right.
Goto 297 4-inch Senko.
You know why I know that? You know why? Right. Roland Martin's favorite color.
Yeah, he's got. Yeah, exactly. So if Roland can throw it, anybody can throw it. That's the perfect. If you're going to get an all-around one color, I wouldn't recommend doing that. But if you're going to do that, you know what I mean. That's a great number. That 297 pumpkin with black. So back to the snap weight story, Ange. Yep. The company is called Offshore. So if you look that up, if you go in there, it's Offshore. I should have known that. We got planer boards and we got all the snaps and all that. Just sometimes you get brain dead. But Offshore, they're little red clips. You see them, they got a little tit inside there, and you just snap them on different weights. They sell the weights, they sell the kits, everything like that. So, sorry about that.
Okay, bill baits aren't produced based on where you fish from and 100 pieces of data. Okay, that one that's going to be. I'm just going to quickly read through some of these and see what we can answer. Some of them we'll have to answer off air too, right?
Yeah. As Angela's scanning through there, we had a comment. We were getting all kinds of comments too about why we should be fishing, we shouldn't be fishing. And another guy says, why is it safer at Walmart than 12 miles offshore? So he's comparing that it's safer out 12 miles offshore than it is at Walmart with all the other people. Well, I'm going to tell you something, buddy. Just like Ance and I were talking about earlier, when you're 12 miles offshore and your motor goes, let's say you have a problem, it's a unanticipated problem, you're less safe out 12 miles offshore. So you got to think of everything. I get the isolation thing, and I get that, you know what I mean? But you got to think of everything. So when you're saying a statement like that, is it safer at Walmart or 12 miles offshore, nobody around? But if there's nobody around and your boat counts out, there's nothing safe about that either. So you got to be cautious and be prepared for it. So that's just one more thing. And then you got something?
Eric Yamada wants to know, how often do you guys get to fish without a camera?
Ooh.
Camera recording.
Nice.
I would say we maybe twice a year, one time a year for sure, when we were fishing the B1 tournaments up until this past year. Maybe one other time a year we managed to get. I'll tell you where we do get out for most of that. When we do get out is when it's really, really crappy weather. When it's blowing, raining, snowing, and all the rest of it, and our camera guys refuse to go out,
Yeah.
Pete and I go out and we have at it.
Scout
So
a little bit, right? Well, you got to remember, driving rain is the worst thing. You can't shoot in driving rain. If the rain's coming down on an angle like this, it's hitting the lens of the camera. You can't shoot no matter what. No matter the POV cameras like GoPro set up or anything like that, or Garmin Verb cameras set up, you just can't. They're all getting soaked. So there's no sense in having a camera hand even on the boat because the image is there. But that doesn't mean that Angie and I can't go out and pre-fish, look around, learn the lake. If we did it at a couple of lodges last year, and you learn a lot sometimes by doing that too, right? We did it at Alberta that one year. We found a great spot by doing that. So, but we do. I mean, I fish a lot of weekends too. I like to get up if we're going to go to my father-in-law's cottage. I'm not going to the father-in-law's cottage and not go fishing. That's for sure. You know what I mean? So I got some buddies that we try and make it out as much as we possibly can too. And to be honest, we learn a lot when we're fishing with no camera too, because now you can experiment. Now you can play. When Angie and I got that camera going all day long, it's like a tournament. You got to produce. You have to produce. So you're almost going back to your tried and true techniques. You really have a hard time playing around and looking around. I mean, Angie's the champ at experimenting. He will, when things aren't going right, he will do some concoction with his baits wise, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But at least he gets out there and try. I'm kind of that guy that I know this is going to work. I just have to keep going and going on. It's not necessarily a good thing, right? You're not learning out there. So when I get out by myself, a lot of times I fish by myself, and that's when I really learn. You know what I mean? I sit down and I put the rod down and I say, okay, I'm going to watch my Garmin for an hour. I'm just going to sit there and watch my electronics and learn from that. Oh, that's what that looks like. Go back over it with different screens, back and forth, and that's where you can really learn. So we do get out.
I like the fact that a lot of people are asking questions and answering them themselves. This is very cool.
With each other,
Very
fantastic.
I'm glad you mentioned that experimenting, because a lot of us, trying to shoot a television show notwithstanding, let's put that aside for a minute. But I think in our day-to-day fishing lives, a lot of us are still reluctant to experiment for some reason. Oh, yeah. And I'll tell you what it's all about, in my opinion. It's about confidence. You've got that go-to bait that has been at your side from the beginning of time, and you know that if things get tough, you could throw that bait in there, and it might take you a while, but you're gonna scrounge out a fish on that bait. So what it does, it gives you confidence to use it. And so you're reluctant not to use your go-to bait. That's just human nature. It's just the way we are. And that's why I think we talked about it last week. That's why, we talked about it with Gord. That's why it's not unusual during a tournament to have the top 3 anglers in that event all using totally different baits. Same circumstances, totally different baits. And it's all about confidence. And fishing, it's no different than golf or tennis or playing hockey or anything. When it comes right down to it, a lot of it is between the ears. I don't care what anybody says. A lot of it is in here. And if you don't have that confidence, and the easiest way to get confidence is to lock yourself into a particular bait. If you don't have that, it's tough out there. I don't care who you are. Yeah. You can't go out and fish without having confidence in either your ability or your equipment to catch fish, and you just won't fish as good without it. So
now I'll elaborate again on that. In that what I just said before Anne said that, when I go out and I won't cast and I'll watch my electronics for an hour. I don't want to do that. I want to cast. I want to catch fish. You know what I mean? You're out there fishing, but you got to learn. So you have to say, okay, I have to draw the line here somewhere. If I want to learn how to use my Garmin, I can't do that standing in the front, cast, look. I have to be looking at that screen all the time. Then you start casting and working with it. Same thing goes with learning baits. When I fished tournaments, when I first started fishing bass tournaments, I was a jig and pig and a plastic worm guy, hands down. That was it. That's all I'm going to throw. I don't care. I know I can catch them with that. I'm only going to get 6 or 7 fish in a day, but they're going to be good ones. Then I keep hearing about these guys, Bruce Fitzgibbons, Askins, those guys that were throwing spinner baits and they were catching 30 an hour, 32.5 to 3.5 pounders an hour on a flat. I'm thinking, it's not even possible. You can't catch bass like that, largemouth bass in these big weedy flats like that. So finally, I got my ass kicked so many times that I said, I'm not bringing my jig and pig, and I'm not bringing my plastic worms out anywhere. I'm bringing spinner baits of 2 or 3 types, tandems, singles, willows, whatever. and I'm going to start learning about what these guys are doing to see if it's true. And sure as heck, I went out there on these flats and I looked around the areas, and even in the shallow water, I started throwing spinnerbait only, and I got to, in my opinion, was pretty good. To me, I was good with it in my own mind. Same thing with chatterbaits. You know what I mean? Like a chatterbait is kind of still an upcoming bait in Canada. Well, I said a couple of years ago, I'm going to learn to use a chatterbait because everybody's catching fish on these things. And so I just said, everything else stays away. You have a backup rod, maybe a Senko is a backup rod, but you really have to put everything away and then just start working, study up and read about everything, and then go with that in mind, that one thing in mind. I'm going to learn to use a chatterbait in the next 5 times out in the water. And that's it. And then you will learn. Once you succeed, once you get a fish or two, you start saying, oh, hey, that braided line worked better than the floral. Hey, the stop and go, lift and drop, whatever. You have to do it, or you're never going to learn. And you have to do a lot of it and get confident in it. So,
I mean, ideally, you want confidence in yourself, not your baits. That's what I was going to say. When it's all said and done, if you don't experiment, if you don't risk, if you're not a risk taker out there, you're going to continue relying on a particular bait or a presentation for your confidence. When you become a really good angler, when you are that guy on the boat that always catches fish, it's because you have confidence in yourself, not your tools. And that is really, really important. Having confidence in yourself, knowing that your decisions are the right ones, is worth $1 million for an angler. And the only way you do that is to, wean yourself from your security blanket, wean yourself from that 6-inch, blue and gold Rapella, blue and silver Rapella that you use every time you're in trouble, or yep. that, that pig and jig that you rely on catching largemouth with all the time. You have to wean yourself off it. So you have to be a bit of a risk taker, because eventually what happens when you do that, you've got confidence in yourself. The most valuable tool that you can have is yourself. Doesn't matter what you use, doesn't matter what the conditions are, because there are always variables out there. Doesn't matter. If you know that you can do the job, you're going to become a much more effective angler, and you're going to be enjoying the activity a lot more as well. And that's really key.
Ruben Kincaid. Ruben Kincaid. That's probably people don't know that name. Most of them don't know that name, but it's an old TV name. But experimenting takes time, and time on the water is so precious. It makes it harder to experiment, and that's true.
Yeah.
But you bite the bullet. You have to bite the bullet. If you got 2 or 3 guys in the boat and nothing's working, that's a time when you might want to experiment a little bit too. You know what I mean? Now you got your guys running the tried and true Mepses and everywhere for walleye and Rapala or something like that. You're going to change something totally different. That's when times, Hans and I, we've seen this all of a sudden. You caught a fish on that? How'd that work? And you try some different. So it's precious time. Our seasons in Canada are short. Our open water seasons are definitely shorter than the rest of the continent. So time is of an essence, but you gotta play around or you're not going to learn.
Let me share a quick story about that. I don't want to take up valuable time here, but I think it's important noting this. Now, some of you may have heard me tell this story before, but I think it's really key. A good friend of ours, Roland Martin, the winningest dude on the planet in terms of professional angler, the second longest television series on the planet in terms of fishing shows, just an all-around, he is, the consummate angler. Well, a few years ago, about 10 years ago, we were having dinner, just him and I, and he leaned into me and he whispered, because he didn't want anybody to hear. He said to me, I think I'm going to retire from tournament fishing. And I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked. I said, what are you talking about? That's what you do. What do you mean retire? I'm getting too old. I said, you're out of your mind. You're still at the top of your game, was my answer to him, right? He said, no, I know. He said, but he says, lately, he says, I can't see those fish anymore. I said, well, join the club. Get yourself a pair of glasses. What do you think? You're the only person who's had a sight problem as you got older? And he says, no, that's not what I'm talking about. He says, up until a couple of years ago, I could be ripping across a lake that I've never been on before in my bass boat at 70 miles an hour. And I'm looking at my unit and I see a back bay, and I look over my shoulder and I see the back bay way off in the distance. I used to be able to see fish from there. What are you talking about? Yeah, that's how I pre-fish. So I could see that bay had fish, and that one didn't, and that one didn't. From the middle of the lake, as I'm scooting by, he says, "Well, the last couple of years, when I stopped to go check them out, there's no fish there." Like, think about what he's saying to me, guys. Okay, how absurd this conversation is. Probably the greatest angler of our time is telling me that he has got so much confidence in his ability to catch fish that he thinks he actually sees them from miles away as he's scooting down the lake at 70 miles an hour. That's how much confidence Roland had. Anyways, what he was telling me is that he lost confidence in himself. He didn't have the confidence in his ability to find fish anymore. And in fact, about a month after that dinner we had, he announced to the world that he was retiring from competitive fishing. And of course, as you all know, he eventually, a couple of years later, he ended up going back to it. He just couldn't stand it anymore. But we've had several conversations since then. And I always remind him about that. And I always talk to him about that. And he says, yeah, he went through a spell where he lost his confidence. And Roland's confidence, he had so much confidence, unlike most of us. He had so much confidence in himself that he didn't even need to go in and check a bay. He knew it had fish, and he knew a bay didn't have fish. That's how much confidence he had in himself. So, and that's how important it is, because to a guy like that, that's the difference between winning $100,000 on a weekend and not winning. So it's key. It's very, very important. Make the time to experiment.
Yeah. There's I'll do a generic part of this question. The guy's asking about size of trolling motor batteries. If you're running the lead cell batteries, if you try to get group 27, it's a good all-rounder. Yeah. It's a bigger battery than the group 24s. It lasts longer. But the batteries are dying out. Make sure, okay, batteries have a life on them, okay? And a couple to 3 seasons is probably max on for real top efficient batteries like that battery. So after 3 or 4 years, if you're worried about your battery, it's dying. Even no matter what, if you kept the fluids up, you've got a trickle charge and a good charger on it and all that, you need to keep your batteries newish. You know what I mean? So depending on how much you use them. If you don't use them a lot, well, that's different. Remember, deep cycle batteries, you're running from top to down to zero all the time, not like a cranking battery. It's just up and down, up and down, up and down, and getting charged all the time. So your deep cycle batteries, group 27 is a good number. If you're looking around, they all are a class like that. I think there's 24, 27, and 31s or something like that, or as a rule, but 31s are huge. So 27 is a good number, a group 27.
And Pete, let's not forget too, and this is really important with lead core batteries, more so than some of the newer battery types on the market today. Deep cycle batteries require total discharging before you charge it up. If you continually top it up, a deep cycle battery will have half its life, its normal life expectancy. It's vital. It's important. I remember when we used to run deep cycle batteries, conventional lead deep cycle batteries. If at the end of the day you thought you still had some charge in the motor, turn it on, let it run, even up on the trailer. Let it run out before you charge it, because if you just keep topping it up, eventually what will happen is that's the maximum capacity that you'll have in that battery, and that's vital. Check it out. Go on the internet and check out lead core batteries. It's deep cycle. So.
It was Ruben Kincaid again. I think they said that because he went 2 to 3 years. Yikes! I need a new trolling motor battery. Group 27 got it. So his is obviously 5 or 6 years old, probably.
Well, you know what? But I'll bet you anything, and Ruben, let us know. I'll bet you Ruben is the type of guy who completely empties that battery out rather than top it up. Even if he goes out for a couple hours, topping it out. That's the worst thing you can do for these batteries. The absolute worst. Kill that battery before you charge it up again.
I think nowadays too, we'll stay on this one for a little bit. A lot of companies are now running a dual purpose battery, and they're doing very well with them. So they are a cranking-ish and they are a deep cycle. I mean, they're mostly for deep cycle. So they're using that because now you have to run your electronics, and there's all kinds of different things on different batteries and all that. So some are running combo batteries for their trolling motors too. And I think they're a little more efficient in that you don't have to knock them right down to the bottom. that's the modern technology. But
you know how I feel about running a crank battery as your trolling motor battery.
well, no, I didn't say that. I said
No.
there's trolling motor battery with a bit of a cranking, some juice for cranking. So
Yeah.
it's a combo the other way, not the way you're talking about. It's a combo the other way.
To me, a battery is either a deep cycle or it's not. That's my opinion, and I'll stick with it. How's that?
Of course. Of course.
Of course, you don't necessarily have to stick with lead core batteries, do you, Pete?
No. I mean, right now, all of a sudden, we have lithium batteries. Like, there's a lot of, I think there's a few companies we got lithium pros in our boat, and they are like out of this world, but their prices out of this world too. So they're expensive as hell, but they're worth it if you can afford it. It's like anything. It's like the top end Garmin units with live scope. If you can afford to put that on your boat, you better do it, because it's going to give you an advantage. So the same thing with these lithium ion batteries. They're nice and light and efficient, and they run right until all of a sudden they're done. Then boom, and they're done. They don't just die off and get weaker and weaker. They hold full power till the end of the day, and so they're very good. You got to have an affordability in there too. So
glad you said that. There are some things that you should scrimp and save and not spend money on. But there's others that just don't make sense to me. Now, batteries, yeah, okay, it's a little extravagant. What we do with batteries on FNC1 is ridiculous. So I'm not going to suggest that anybody goes there. But Pete just mentioned sonar. You mentioned, a sonar unit, and in our particular case, Garmin. Yeah, I do believe it's the best product on the market. That's why we use it, just so that you know. But it doesn't have to be a Garmin. It can be any. How many people scrimp and save there on as far as sonar goes, and people I know when we had the store, I used to debate this with guys all the time. How many people scrimp on that? To me, that's one of the most vital parts about. Somebody mentioned earlier on, yeah, but we can't experiment because we don't have a lot of time when we go out fishing. Precisely why you shouldn't scrimp and save on electronics. It's the single most important tool that you can purchase in order for you to go directly to the fish. Think about it. What other tool, if used properly, can take you directly to a spot that has fish? No other tool. No other tool can do that. So that's not an area where you want to scrimp and save. You want to get the absolute best value for your dollar. And in most cases, it's a unit that's got a few bells and whistles. Not all. You don't need to spend $10,000 on a unit. Don't get me wrong. But you need to do your homework and make sure that it has all of those great little tools. Quick draw being one of them. Quick draw is quickly becoming a tool for us that we just cannot fish without. And nor why would you? But quick draw is one of those little things that you have to look for in a unit to make sure. And that's the ability to actually do your own recording of the lake bed rather than depend on a recording that you can purchase via map or comes built into the unit. And it is the only and most precise way to actually draw a very accurate painting of what's below the boat is with quick draw. So little things like that. Now with Panoptics and Live Scope and all this stuff that's available, those are musts. You can't fish without them anymore. It's impossible to do that. So areas like that, you got to scrimp. You can cut back. You don't have to get the big 25-foot boat and all the bells and whistles. You don't need the 300 horsepower engine, although I might argue that you do. But you know what I mean? You can cut back on those. But sonar, that's an area you cannot afford to sacrifice if you want to be in the game, the fishing game.
I'll give you the people a good example in the Garmin world. If you are iffy on going from a regular plus unit to an ultra high definition, the UHD unit, you can afford it. Just do it. It's that much of a better picture. Garmin has been putting in so much time, R&D into giving you a better product ultimately. So little wee tiny things like that. Because I'll tell you what, the regular Garmin sight finding is awesome. But when they put it in an ultra high definition, it just makes it that much clearer. So if you're saying, do I need that or don't? You need it. If you can afford it, you need it. So you that's not a huge upgrade. That's very minute in the world of money. And then you got to remember this too. if you're buying these units and you're going to have them on your boat for 3 or 4 years, you don't need to be, I got to upgrade, all that kind of stuff. You don't want to do that. So get as good a unit as you can get, and then you update the software. Garmin's going to make this better for you, and it's really easy. You download the software in your computer, put it on an SD card, you bring it out, and you plug it into your unit on the boat, and, beep, beep, and you're all of a sudden, whoa, that's awesome. This thing did that. It's the same unit. So buy as good as you can. At the moment, and especially if you're keeping them for a while, then really think about the best that you can buy for sure.
An interesting question. I think we should answer it. Matthew Hood wants to know: do you guys ever get skunked? So here's what I can tell you. The answer, by the way, it does happen. Thankfully, not that often, but I can honestly tell you the days where that has happened, and there have been a handful in the last several years, for me personally, are the days where I go home with the most knowledge about what I did wrong, right? The days where you're catching fish after fish, or the days where you're in, say, a prefrontal explosion feeding frenzy, and you can't stay away from it because everything you throw out there, you're learning nothing. Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, of course. And us, it's great because we get to do our jobs without the pressure that we normally have. So those days are wonderful. Don't get me wrong, but those are few and far between. The days where it's tough is when you really should learn. And the reason I bring that up is because the days that I can remember that we got skunked are days that we probably did things that we shouldn't have done. We took some chances that we shouldn't have taken. We did things, we did the wrong things. The only reason that you'll get skunked, by the way, and I don't care who you are, where you are, in what situation it is, you didn't do all the right things that you needed to do.
Hello. Turn that thing off. Unless that's Roland Martin calling you back, they turn that off.
Actually, it was a little more important than that, but we'll leave it off. So those are the days where you need to learn. You didn't catch fish. You didn't get the rush of catching fish, but I'll tell you, you better go home with something, and that something should be knowledge. You need to analyze what you did, because what you did was not right. That's the only reason. Now, unless the lake is dead and totally void of any life form, then that's a whole different ballgame. But if the body of water has fish in it, you can have all the adverse conditions you want. It doesn't matter. You did something wrong. And in our case, we did something really wrong because we should know better. And so we'll go home, shaking our heads. But at the end of the day, we go home learning that's not what we should have done. So you hopefully you can recall that and use it to your advantage. But we do periodically. Thank God we don't. It doesn't happen that often. Like skunk is that's a very severe term for us. Yeah. We sometimes don't get what we want, all right, but not catching another living organism at all it shouldn't happen. It just should not happen.
Pretty rare for sure. Got one from Carter Fleck. It's a pretty good one. What are some tips and tricks on early season lake trout without downriggers? That's a pretty good question. Go ahead.
I'll answer one real quick. It's probably over now. Well, for sure it is. Planer boards. Using planer boards. There's a time of year right after ice out that lake trout in most bodies of water are up in that upper section of the water column, or if not right at the surface, and they're very, very vulnerable. They're very catchable, but they spook because they're up so high in the water column. Just the shadow and the sound of the boat spooks them. And if you could see it from the air, if you could see through water and you're right above your boat, you'll see exactly what happens. As you're approaching them, you don't know they're there. As you're approaching them, that school will split up and your boat will run right through them. And that's where planer boards are. It seems on Erie for walleye. That's where planer boards are worth their weight in gold. But for lake trout, that time of year, that opening, I would say, 5 to 10 days, if it's been a long winter and the ice just recently went out, that's where you need planer boards for these big lake trout for sure.
Then going a little later than Bonanza's talking about. We'll say for maybe even now. Well, some lakes are still iced up north, so there is some ice coming up. But we learned one. It's funny because we learned a lot in our trips away from the norm too. So up in Northwest Territories, stuff like that. Great Bear Lake, one of their favorite lures to troll up there. They don't use downriggers, so they don't need to. Is the giant flatfish, the big T55, T60 flatfish. It's a great bait. It's just got this boom, 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 wild wobble. And, you know, most people like to use spoons. Well, these guys got onto this big flatfish pattern up there for real giants. Okay, the spoons were catching big fish, small fish. These big flatfish, for some reason, were catching the giants. So what we've done is the further south we go, the smaller the baits. It's still using a flatfish style bait. Flatfish. What's the other one? Ends that
Lever.
Well, no, but that would work too. But there's another one just like the flatfish. Quick fish.
Yeah.
So one of those two. Either of those two work well. I mean, when we were in Athabasca, there we were trolling. We were flat lining big, you know, down about 30 feet of water, 30 to 40 max. Throwing long lining these quick fish and flatfish out there, and we were just trying. They weren't even big ones; these were the smaller ones. And we got one fish that was pushing 35 to 40 pounds doing that. So if you want to, go ahead.
What color it was?
The pink one, wasn't it, or something? Yeah. So I mean, it's the action of that bait. It's like a crankbait, but it's just got this wide wobble to it, a flatfish. So that's a really good tip that not a lot of people are doing out there. If you want to troll, if you want to cast, we love throwing like a fluke, the bass flukes, like a 5-inch white or shad colored fluke, either unweighted when it's really early in the year and throw it right up to the shore and working it just like bass, just pop, pop, and that bait just sort of like that, or actually throwing a swim bait or a fluke or a swim bait on a jig head and just casting out and basically reeling it back nice and slow so that tail is just wobbling back. There's a few tips there that you might not be doing, and it's good for early lakers as long as, you know, they're not down to that 80 feet of water.
And by the way, those quick fish or flatfish on sideboards, planer boards.
Oh yeah,
man, absolutely.
That would be killer for sure. So hopefully that answered, give them a few ideas anyway. So.
What do we got here? Somebody's asking what to use for smallmouth up around Sudbury. For me, I've said it a million times. You know, it's hard for me to get away, depending on the circumstances. Obviously, for me, a shad-shaped worm is the go-to bait for especially for smallies and walleye. It's you know, drop shotting has become such an important part of my fishing arsenal now that I would never start a day without it. And that's not necessarily the right thing, by the way. I'm telling you this, you know, to be cautious about that. Getting hung up on one bait or one style or one presentation is not necessarily a good thing. So be cautious is all I could say.
And John, I'll expand on Angelo's because I did fish my whole entire life in the Sudbury area. Every year with summer holidays. My mom was from Sudbury, so we used to go back and fish all the time. And back then, I was just learning to fish bass, but and smallmouth and largemouth. But I'll tell you what, a small popper style of topwater bait in morning, evening, and sometimes right in the middle of the day, a topwater bait or a smaller walking bait, not the real big giant spooks, but maybe a smaller spook or a normal spook. There's a couple other walking baits out there, and mega bass and stuff like that. You got to be careful because up there, if you're throwing mega bass, you got lots of pike up there too. But a topwater is a fantastic bait to throw. And another one is a floating minnow bait. So, I mean, I learned on the old original Rapala. I'd throw it out and I'd either reel it really, really slow, or I'd stop and go on the surface, working it like a surface bait, like real close to the top, but really slow retrieve. And it really got those smallies going. Nowadays, I'd probably get it more erratic and really work that bait crazy. But a minnow bait or a topwater bait, or as well as the drop shot baits Angel's talking about, are killer up there everywhere, but they're killer up there too.
A great question from TC Sports. He wants to know, he says, you guys always seem to be able to fish weed edges and weed lines and weeds without getting hung up and getting snagged. He says, I do it. I get snagged and I end up breaking my line. What's the secret? Well, there is no secret, first of all. Although, you know, it's familiarity, right? We know what each one of our baits are going to do at any given time. And the other if there is a secret, and there is not. But the other thing is being always aware of what your capabilities are, and looking at the situation, always being aware, what can I do here? What can I not do here? And we certainly would not go into an area that is weed choked with 6-pound monofilament line and throwing a bait that's got a couple of treble hooks hanging off it. We just wouldn't do that, right? So we're always constantly doing the calculations. We're always constantly. We did a great commercial for Ontario Tourism years ago, and it was called something about fishing being a math question, and there's constant calculations going on between every cast. You're constantly calculating. Well, that's the truth. That's the God's honest truth, and it's also why Pete and I would find it very hard. If you want to punish us, take us out fishing and give us one rod and reel and say, there you go. That's your stick for the whole day. You might as well lock us up in jail. We can't do that. And the reason being, it was what I just told you. We're constantly calculating, and we're constantly formulating what the next cast is going to look like and what we're going to need. And all I can say is that we're fishing really weed-choked areas. We're probably using the right equipment for it that'll enable us to rip through those weeds, because sometimes you do want to do that. You want to. We talked about it last week with Gord on the show. Sometimes you want to do what's called rip jigging, and we purposely throw our baits, or in this case jigs, right in the heart of the weeds and rip them back. But in other cases, we're using the right tools for the job. We don't want to avoid weeds. We never avoid. We love fishing weeds, but you have to fish them effectively. And
Matthew Hood says, "Man, I've caught some nice weeds." That's awesome. We got one from the A.G. Martin from Guelph. He says, "Have you ever tried Whopper Plopper or the Berkeley Chopos topwater baits? We've tried Whopper Ploppers. We've never used the Berkeley product. I've seen them out there right now. We've never used them, but
it's the same.
Yeah, same idea exactly. I don't even know what the differences would be, but Whopper Plopper, for instance, if anybody doesn't know what we're talking about, it's basically it's a topwater bait. The front section is all like a spook bait or something, like does nothing, but the back section it spins, has one prop on it and just spins around. And I think they probably were derived from the Muskie guys, because the Muskie guys have been throwing those for years. The big version, like blah, 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 and they get some great bites. But a Whopper Plopper, oh yeah, or a Chopo, great bait for largemouth and smallmouth. Smallmouth rip at those things. If you get the right weed bed over a cabbage bed or something like that, and you throw Whopper Plopper over for smallies, they will just annihilate that thing. You think it's a muskie or a pike if you have muskie or pike in the lake. It's just that vicious a strike. So
didn't we run into a situation just last year, Pete, where we only had one of those baits? Someplace we were fishing last year or the year before.
We have that often when we get down to some. That's usually you come into the box and you say, "Hey, I'm going to try this," and you go, "We only got one. Sorry, Pete."
By the way, Pete is famous for that. Okay, he is famous for that. We'll 18 hours of flights and walking and trucking into these tiny little back lakes, and we get out there and we start going through the collection of baits to see what's going to work and sure as hell, the one that's working, we only have one of.
That's hard though. When you go into a spot, when you're flying in for that long a time, and you gotta whittle it down to, do you bring a lot of one or two things, or a few of a bunch of things? So that it's a hard decision sometimes to go into these places and do that. So like if we're going to go and get spinners, inline spinners for trout, do you get 10 golds, or do you get 2 colors, 2 golds, 2 silvers, 2 chartreuse? You know what I mean? So it's a hard because you're limited to weight too. So I don't even know where that was. What was that question?
Whopper.
Yeah. Great baits for sure.
Steve Nichols wants to know, if you were to fish Lake Nipissing for walleye, what technique, lure, bait would you use?
You need Steve Nizwicki here for that. the boys that drop a jig and minnow, right? That's what they use.
I was going to say, it's pretty simple up there. Although same thing in our case, I'm sure Pete and I would find a color, a profile of plastic that would be, and nipissing is a tough one because it changes on an hour-to-hour basis, by the way.
Yeah.
If you're not using live bait, you had better be prepared to change things. For some reason on that body of water, the walleye either, well, I know what the reason is, because there's such big schools, tightly knit little communities of walleye. If you take 2 or 3 fish out of that school, if you're not using live bait, they kind of get very, very suspicious of that color and that size that you just took 2 of their buddies out of the school with. So you have to continually be changing and experimenting. But for some reason on that lake, you drop a minnow down there, it's gone. It's gone in a heartbeat. So
yeah, and a lot of those fish are deep too on Nipissing, right? Like a lot of the fish that Steve was fishing they're all 20+ feet deep, right? So trolling those guys just to get down there is hard enough, and they're all on humps. It's all different varieties of areas. So basically these boys Steve's guides, they just sit on one spot and drop a jig and minnow down there, and if there's nothing there, but in 5 minutes, boom, they go to another place. But jig and minnow is the deal there for sure.
I've never seen bigger schools of walleye in my life than on that body of water.
That's awesome. There's tons.
Like millions of them. And then like Pete said, a couple of minutes into it, gone.
Yeah. It's weird. Very weird. But it is a great fishery still to this day. So
any tips for stocked rainbow lakes besides using power bait on hooks?
Power bait and hooks is pretty good. That's for sure. A lot of times, Ange and I, we like to. Those are the lakes that we really like. The little that we do it, but we like to experiment a lot. And that would be like a tiny little minnow baits. The smallest little minnow baits, the countdown minnow baits that sink down actually, and you can kind of work at the depth and slow reel, pop it reel, change the variety like that. So those are the spinners and stuff like that. Everybody uses. We like to experiment a little bit with that. So. That and of course spoons, but like a heavy spoon, like a Clio or something like that you can either troll it, cast it, or literally you can jig a spoon. A lot of times you just pull it up and let it flutter down, pull it up and let it flutter down, stuff like that. So once you get onto the area you think the fish are in, or if you have a portable fish finder, or it's a lake that you can get your bigger boat on and you see the fish in there, that's the time when we play around with. We like to use artificial baits a lot. If we can get away with it, we'll use artificial all the time, right? Answer me. It's what we do. We really enjoy that, and then figuring them out. So, and then another thing is little swim baits, the small little swim baits. I mean, the 3 inches, not too big, 3 and 4 inches, but those little swim baits and just a direct throw it out, light line, and just constant reel, so that bait's coming in at one level, but it's got that tail just flopping along. They're really good too, natural colors.
And then you get into a situation like we did a couple of years ago in Quebec, where none of that worked. And the only thing that was catching fish were flies. And when I mean flies, I mean like wet flies and big, little streamer flies that you would use on a fly rod. We were trolling with them.
Yep.
And that was the only thing that would catch fish. None of those little things that Pete just talked about that we normally use, and we went to all of those, none of them would catch a fish except this little fly. And I think there was only that one pattern, Pete, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe one or two patterns.
Leech pattern or something weird. Yeah.
It was.
And then also, that's another good tip too, is that works great on brook trout as well.
Oh, for sure.
Troll flies for brookies. Even if you have to put it on spinning gear or whatever with a little split shot.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, that's a good technique, and it'll clean house if you have fly rods, it's even better, because then you can just troll the fly rod and have the whole fun and all that stuff. But trolling flies is a great trout technique in small lakes.
Okay, here's one that's going to be difficult to answer. I love doing it. I love doing it hands-on, but going to be tough to get through this on this medium. And it's from Kevin Steves. And he wants to know, he just bought 2 bait casters, not just, he owns 2 bait casting outfits, and he still can't get the hang of it. What do I do? Video is not going to help you. And I know you're talking about video. And it has nothing to do with the quality of what it is you bought, by the way. Absolutely nothing. First of all, let me say this, and hopefully this is not politically incorrect, I'm sure I'll be corrected if it is. If you don't own one of these or one of these, you can't bait cast. So you have to have a thumb. No matter how many of the manufacturers are telling you now that their technology has made it absolutely foolproof and flawless. You can cast, no thumb required. If you don't own one of these, you should own a bait caster. That's the first thing.
That's true.
Hopefully that's not.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
The most important thing about bait casting is that it's very much a contact or feel form of fishing. You need to have contact with that line, that spool, that reel at all times with this, especially in the first few years that you're starting out. If you don't have it, it's going to be what'll happen with bait casters. I would love sometime to do a survey and see what percentage of the bait casting rods and reels that are sold each year end up making it past the first 1 or 2 years without going into the garage, up in the rafters, in the bowels of the boat, in the trunk of the car, and never to see daylight again because people get frustrated with it. One of the things about bait casting is that you cannot go out fishing and learn how to bait cast. You have to go out and learn how to bait cast. Once you've mastered it, then you go fishing. You can't do the two at the same time. It will never, ever work. So rule number one, if you truly want to become a bait cast user, you have to forego some fishing time. In fact, forego time on the water, period. Because the best way to learn how to use a bait cast is on dry land, at a park, a backyard. Backyard's not a good example, but a big area, a big open area without any overhead obstructions like wires and trees. And that's where you learn. And you learn by doing it over and over and over and over again. Once you're comfortable with it, then you can take it out on a boat or on a dock and actually start trying to catch fish with it. But you can't do the two at the same time. So
it's like we said earlier, Ans, with learning a bait, learning how to spinner bait, learning your electronics, you got to dedicate to just that. Don't worry about the fishing. Don't worry about catching fish. Learn how to bait cast first. Lots of time, learn how to bait cast. And Ans and I, we use different settings on a bait caster. What works for him doesn't work for me, and vice versa. You know what I mean? So you got to figure things out for yourself too. So
yeah,
lots of time, lots of practice.
But don't ignore the obvious things. There's two functions on a bait casting reel, right? There's the magnets, which everybody knows and uses, although in most cases not correctly. And then there's another device, and it's called different things on different reels. But basically, what it does, it tightens the actual shaft. It doesn't have a magnetic pull. It's like, think of it as brake shoes on a car, the old drum brakes on a car. It actually tightens around the axle of your bait caster and makes it more difficult for it to spin. The tighter that setting is, the more body English you're going to require to get a cast off. But it's a good way to start learning by having it really tight so you don't get any overrun. Overrun is what happens when you get a bird's nest. An overrun happens when the projectile or the bait stops moving. So you made your cast, the bait stops moving, but the axle of the bait caster is still revolving. That's when you get that bird's nest. So to avoid that, two things. Number one, you make sure that you have one of these in working order, okay? And secondly, you tighten that adjustment, and it's generally on a conventional reel, it's generally on the right-hand side of the reel. Now, if it's a left-handed reel, obviously it's on the other side, but generally most reels have got it. And it's a little cap, and you adjust that so it's completely tight. You have your bait that you're going to be using on the end of your line. You reel it all the way up to the tip of the rod. You tighten that axle completely tight so it doesn't turn anymore. Now, when you push the disengage button on the reel, nothing will happen. Your bait will not fall down from the tip of your reel. So now what you want to do is just slowly back, and I mean slowly, back that little adjustment back until you get your bait falling, and when it hits the ground, the axle of the reel stops at the same time. That's when you know that you've got this thing set up properly. If you get even a quarter revolution of that reel spinning when that bait hits the ground, you need to reel it back up and tighten that up again a little bit more. What you want to do is get a fluid motion of the bait or the casting plug or whatever you're using to hit the ground, and watch your reel. When it hits the ground, when it stops, your reel stops. Now you're good to go. Now you can have a chance to learn how to bait cast. Now you can work with your magnets on the other side. By the way, when you're doing this, the magnets should be put to 0, right? Turn them to 0 when you're doing this experiment. But once you've got that set, now turn your magnets to 10 or whatever the setting on your reel is, to maximum magnets, and try making a few casts from there, and then slowly back both sides off until you're comfortable. And you're casting a million miles. You're still feathering your spool with your thumb. So when it hits the water, hits the grass, your thumb is still in contact with the reel, and you'll learn. But give it a chance.
Bill Playfoot has it best here. I owned a Ryobi E1 that had a computer-controlled backglass baitcaster. Worked great until the battery died. I love that. He was on
one of these. You don't bait cast. Remember that.
Oh, that's awesome, buddy. I love that. That's so funny. He worked great until the battery died.
Another one, most bait casters overthrow their baits. They're forcing their cast, and he's absolutely right. Eventually, what happens with bait casters is eventually it becomes so fluid, there is hardly any effort on the angler's part when you're making those big, beautiful, long, targeted, precision casts. There's no effort at all. Your equipment is doing all the work. That's when you know you're there, right? So, but it takes time. It takes time.
Here's one that Calvin's been popping in and out, or somebody's been popping in and out, and it irks me, this question, still to this day, is the walleye versus pickerel, the name walleye and pickerel, whatever. Okay, people, let me tell you something right now. It is walleye. Okay, if you look in the fishing regulations, it's walleye. If you go to a fisheries biologist and get that yellow fish with a little white tip under its tail, it's a walleye. If you go to any experts in any of the fishing world, it's walleye. Okay, a pickerel is a totally different fish when you're looking at it as a chain pickerel. The problem is the old school guys, my dad included, even when I was growing up, I saw it with thousands of guys, is they called it pickerel for some reason. It's a nickname. All it is a nickname, and it builds a big debate. So, but you'll never see it written in your regulations as pickerel instead of walleye. You will always see walleye with brackets pickerel. Okay, so pickerel is just a nickname. It's like bull rod. My nickname is bull rod. Pete Bowman's my name. Hey, bull rod. You know what I mean? It's a nickname that some people will use, and I don't know how it ever was derived. It's definitely a Northern Ontario thing, and a Northern Quebec. I think they call it, instead of doré, the English people that moved into Canada or into Ontario, they're doing the pickerel thing all the time too. So, and I'm sure even across the nation, maybe Manitoba too. I'm not sure about that, but it's just a nickname. So it is walleye. That is the name of that fish.
But there is pickerel, and it's not a walleye.
Exactly. It's a totally different fish if you want to go into the pickerel world, for sure.
Benji agrees. Benji Molina says, I prefer a baitcaster over spinning now, but he earlier on said that he learned by flipping and pitching in the backyard to rocks and other objects, and he'd spend an hour after work each day just doing that. And he got comfortable. He got comfortable with it, right? He got to learn the equipment. And that's the important thing about baitcasters. You got to get comfortable with how it works. And I'm telling you, once you do, I mean, I struggle every day that I go out fishing. I know that there are times where a spinning outfit is a must, but I still struggle with those moments. I have to convince myself to use spinning because I love using bait cast so much for all applications. But you should never use bait casting for light line. I mean, it's suicide. No matter how good you are, it's just not the right equipment. You always have to use the right tool for the job. And it's like golfing. There's a reason why a golfer goes out with 9 or 10 or some cases 12, 14, 15 clubs. It's because he uses them. Each club is designed has a different function. Well, bait casting and spinning, it falls into that same category. Each one of these things does a different job. And bait casting is great for heavier line, and rule of thumb for heavier line, and spinning is much better at handling lighter line diameters and strengths. But the two do cross sometimes, and I have a hard time figuring that out. Pete straightens me out whenever I get in trouble.
We got Tim Sturgeon says pike are called jackfish out west. They're called that in Northern Ontario. That's another nickname. Thanks for that, Tim, because I forgot all about that. Then we got one Chase Malcolm. I'm with you, Pete. I hate when people call walleye pickerel. Happens tons in Alberta. So they're obviously called it in Alberta too. In Alberta, by the way, it's a fantastic walleye population, just to let people know. There's lots of stuff. There was one guy who said a chain walleye. Ben Molina says, what is a chain walleye? Well, it's chain pickerel.
Pickerel.
So you're getting them both mixed up together. So it's a chain pickerel or a walleye, but it's not a chain walleye. Yeah. So a chain walleye is the one on a stringer. That's a chain walleye.
Good guy says, when handling fish, do you bare hand? Okay, so what he's saying is, if you're handling fish with your bare hands, you're removing the slime coat, the protective coat that the fish has, and he's absolutely 100% right. If you net the fish, you're removing the slime coat. Anytime you make contact with that fish, there is a chance that you're going to remove some of that coat. And he's saying that's maybe why we have 30% mortality rate. Could very well be. Safe thing to do. If you're not going to take a picture of that fish, the best thing to do is release it at the side of the boat. That's 100% for sure the best thing that you could possibly do. However, if you have to handle the fish for reasons that maybe the bait just will not come out, you were using live bait and it's too deep, or you want to take a picture because it's a trophy fish, one of the smart things to do, it's not the solution by any means, is make sure your hands are at least wet. Always dip your hands in the water before you pick the fish up, and you're going to make contact with that slime coat. It will help in keeping it on the fish and not on your hands. But the truth of the matter is, if we're not happy with that 30%, if you're not happy with that 30% in your particular case, then you should not handle the fish. And that's the best thing we do. Now, it's impossible for us because, well, unless we retire and don't do the Fish in Canada show anymore, I guess then it'd be okay. But it's impossible for us to do because we have to show the fish, right?
Yeah.
But the least amount of handling in contact with that fish, the better its chances of surviving, without question.
What else we got in there? We're probably going to have to start cutting her down pretty soon.
Yeah, we're out of here. I've got the overtime clock ticking in.
There's a good one here: round bait caster versus low profile bait caster. That's a good one because nowadays, I'll tell you, for me personally, I am a small man. Okay, I'm only 5'3" and I'm only 135 pounds. I'm a little guy. My hands are tiny. My hand. So a low profile is perfect for me because I like to palm the reel. I like to hold that reel. I'll put the rod on the bottom and put my whole hand around everything. With small hands and a big round bait caster, it's very inefficient for me. I've tried it with musky stuff and that. I'm horrible at it. I get no strength to hang onto the rod. So mine is a comfort level. If I'm trolling or whatever, that doesn't matter. I've been trolling the line counters, round reel, it doesn't matter. But if I'm casting, for me, I have to worry about a small reel being comfortable, and that's basically the only way I judge it. So. And you got
a round bait caster is, and I know there's manufacturers up there who are going to scream and yell at this, but round bait caster traditionally, in my opinion, should be a trolling reel. But if you're going to be doing all casting, then the low profiles with all the bells and whistles are the way to go. And regardless of your hand size, although I do understand the size thing, because we have to palm that reel. In order to use a bait casting rod and reel properly, you have to have contact with that reel at all times. Novice bait casters will handle it from the handle, and the reel is up here on itself. That's the wrong. You can't do anything with that. You have to hold it with the reel in your hand. You're palming the reel, and the round reels, just in most cases, they're too high a profile. Now Shimano came up with a little one a few years back. I don't know whether they still make it or not. It was the original one was the Calcutta, but then they went to a little tiny version of that.
50, the Calcutta 50.
Calcutta 50, and that kind of worked. But I'm saying, well, why worry about it? Just go to a low profile reel, and problem solved. It's more comfortable. It probably has more bells and whistles on it that you require, and it's just a better reel for casting. Trolling, whole different ballgame, because now line capacity becomes very important. And the big plus on a level wind reel or bait casting reel that's round is that it allows the spool to be full. So you generally have more line capacity. More line capacity is only necessary if you're trolling. You don't need a whole lot of line on a bait caster that you're casting with. There's very few scenarios where a fish is going to require 150 yards of line, of any type of line. And if you are going to let a fish take 150 yards off your spool without doing something, then you deserve to lose the fish. I mean, that's a lot of line. That's an insane amount of line. So all low profile reels have got enough capacity to handle just about anything you need. Otherwise, go to a big level line with lots of line capacity. And in that case, it's a trolling reel.
Benji, sorry about that, buddy. Benji, the walleye, chain walleye was an attempt at humor, but as usual, when you type it out, it doesn't work as well as when you say things, right? So Benji, I apologize. That was a good joke. I like it now. I like it even better now.
Okay,
I'm going to put chain walleye from now on. Got my chain walleye limit today. I like that. Maybe one or two more questions. Then we
right, let's do two more and then we're out here.
Okay, there's one right here. I'll hit on it quick. Braid versus mono for top water. Well, the big differences between braid and mono are there's stretch factor versus no stretch factor, and the fact that mono is the one consistent type of fishing line that floats. So if you have a line that floats and you're running the top water bait, you really should be using the floating line. There are a couple of braids out there that we've discovered that do float, but you better look very closely at them to see, make sure that it's the floating braid. Otherwise, try mono. And then the other thing about mono, it floats for your top water bait. And top waters, everybody, Mr. Viola, myself included, will, if you're not throwing top waters for a long opening weekend, let's say you've had a whole winter of non-bass fishing, all of a sudden you get that swoosh, this toilet bowl flush over a popper. Oh shit! I just set that too fast. If you have braid on there, you pull that thing out of his mouth, away from him, wherever. With mono, at least you've got a stretch factor, and the longer you cast, the more stretch that's in there. It's like a shock absorber. So the harder you pull on that bait, it's not moving as fast as your rod tip. At least it gives that fish a chance to kind of hang on to that bait. So you've got a couple of things there: floating line and stretch, and it helps a lot in top water.
I don't think there's any wiggle room in what Pete just said. There is no exception. There is no but. What he just said is the only way to throw a topwater bait, period. And I'll go one step further, which I don't pay attention to often enough, is that and in fact, this year I might even completely switch to a glass rod. Yeah, a glass rod for throwing topwater baits. That's how critical it is that you give them time to take the bait. I want everything working to my advantage. I want really stretchy line. Now I'm going to want a really wimpy rod with a lot of tip action, so that if I do inadvertently set a fraction of a second too early, my equipment will be forgiving enough that I won't blow another topwater fish. So very important. And topwater is, I mean, I just love it. It's fantastic. One of the all-time favorite modes of fishing, as far as I'm concerned, is topwater, and way underutilized by all of us. I think topwater applies in way more circumstances than we give it credit for, but it's got to be done properly. And monofilament is the way to go. Direct tie to your bait, no snaps and swivels and all that garbage, and as light as you can get away with. Don't overdo it with the line diameter as well.
No, we're gonna get some people that are going, I use braid all the time for topwater now, and that's your own choice. That's up to you. But we're talking about the average angler that wants to learn. Okay, just say, if you're an average angler that doesn't do a lot of it, start with mono and go from there.
Yeah,
okay, that's all we're saying.
It's a must for sure.
How's that, buddy? Is that a wrap, or what is?
I think it's a wrap. We've got a few others that we will do. Okay, one last one. How heavy a jig do you use for rip jigging for walleye? Well, first of all, I hope we understand what we term as rip jigging. Okay, rip jigging can only be used to be effective, and I know there are people who do it. In other words, it has to be a hair jig, a bucktail jig. It has to be a banana shaped jig. Can't be a round jig. It's got to have the right profile and everything else. And weight is really determined by I like to go as light as I can get away with, knowing full well that in order for rip jigging to be effective, I need to penetrate and get to the bottom of that weed base. But I'll still try and use the lightest that I possibly can. 3/8, half, 3/4 if I have to. It just depends on how thick and how badly I need to get to the bottom. And depth has a lot to do with it as well. But it's definitely a banana-shaped head. I know that there's some torpedo-shaped heads that work for rip jigging as well. It's a probably a confidence thing. I've tried them, but I still go back to the banana jig each and every time. But bucktail for sure.
Nothing else. I 100% agree with the answer. I think the reason the banana, going on one step further, I think the banana shape works better is because that eye is in the perfect position to pop out through the weeds. So about a darter head, like Andrew was talking about, so the eye's a little bit further back. It has an area where the weeds can cluster around. So, but 3/8 to half ounce and 3/4 we've used. But start at 3/8. It's a good number. You got to get. It's not a matter. It's not finesse. That is the furthest thing from anything. Rip jigging is about getting down to the bottom and pop as hard as you can, and then popping it again.
Am I right? It's probably one of the most difficult forms of jig fishing in terms of physical
and mental. Just getting yourself to do it.
Yeah.
Getting yourself to rip jig is a chore in itself. That doesn't work. There's no way that can work. And then all of a sudden you're set into a 5-pound walleye. You're like, what?
People who might not be familiar with the term, it's basically setting the hook. You know how you would normally work a jig and you're sort of bouncing it if you're bottom bouncing and you're bouncing it back to the boat, little wee tiny little. Well, rip jigging is like setting the hook every move, except you're in the heart of the weeds.
It's work.
Not sure. You're in the heart of the weeds.
You're snapping it every time. You're popping it and snapping it every time. Like Ann says, it's a hook set. It's like might not be a major hook set, but it's a mini spinning rod hook set. Real quick. So
okay. So all right. So we've talked about when would you use rip jigging and why?
Well, it's all to me. The only time I shouldn't say that. 99% of the time it's in a weed bed, usually when the weeds are coming up. So Southern Ontario is a classic example. On the Kawarthas, they have tons of weeds on a Rice Lake and Buckhorn Lake and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of the walleye go into the weeds. Let's be honest. There's a huge population of walleye in any walleye lake. If there's a weed bed around, there's going to be walleye in those weeds. So the reason you use that rip jigging is you want to get in there and effectively fish the weeds and get down to the bottom. If you can run a bait over top of the weeds and it works, like a crankbait, a spinner, whatever, good on you. That's great. But that's not going to happen all the time. Middle of the day, you want to trigger a bite at 1 in the afternoon on a hot spring to early summer day. That jig getting in there into that heavy, beautiful weed bed is the way to go. So I was going to say the one exception to the rule is I fished a tournament once on the Bay of Quinte years ago, and I was fishing a rock point. And I knew the fish were there. I pre-fished them and I knew they were there, but I couldn't get them to go the day after or 2 days after during the tournament, right? And I had shad body jigs on, small shad body jigs. And I just, for some silly reason, like we do all the time, we experiment. I thought, I'm going to pop jig this, rip jig this in the rocks. Because it was dead flat, right, Answer? It was dead flat about probably June. While I was setting up. Oh, what the hell? I get about a 4-pounder and think, no. Okay, so I didn't even tell my buddy. I think it was Mikey Burris. I didn't even tell him. Okay, put that in. Obviously, now I have to try that again. Next cast, thump! I get another one doing it. And all of a sudden, we went from 0 fish in the boat to culling our limit within minutes. And it worked. So it was a trigger. It was a trigger effect of that jig popping. So it doesn't always have to happen in a weed bed. That's usually you do it because you're clearing weeds. So, but it might work elsewhere for people to try and experiment with it. So depending on the body of the bait you got.
In my case, I have to hand it to Big Brother Reno again. We were fishing Lake Scugog. And at that time, we had pretty primitive means of of detecting. And Skugog, for those of you who don't know, used to be almost chocolate. There was no clarity on it at all. There was zero clarity. But we had this one little point that we had stumbled on that you could troll through every time, and you get, decent walleye out of it. Well, we went one evening to fish it during a real cold front movement, and lo and behold, we didn't get any fish. So Reno got a little bit overzealous, and he started casting. I was still trolling. He started casting just out of desperation. And we had been, unknown to us, we had been fishing the contour of this beautiful weed break, this beautiful weed line at the end of the island, Pete. I showed you that spot a billion times.
Yeah.
And we didn't know that there was a weed line there. We just knew that every time you trolled this one pattern, you got fish, except this one time, and we couldn't get bit. And it was miserable cold and right in the eye of a cold front. Anyways, he goes and makes a desperation cast, and he gets hung up in weeds because that's all it was, just a solid wall of weed beside us. And now he realizes that he's in weeds, and he did exactly what you were just. He just ripped it to try and get his bait out. And he gets a 5-pound walleye. What was that?
I love it.
That's how we learned about this whole rip jigging thing. For the next, we went every night for the next probably month. We just, refined it down to the just perfection. And then, we started hearing and reading more about this thing called rip jigging. In fact, we had stumbled onto it. And what had happened there in our case, where all those walleye that we were catching during prime conditions that were using the channel to move, and we'd make contact with them while we were trolling, because of the cold front, they had moved into the weeds completely.
Yeah.
We didn't know that. And we stumbled on them, and they were all right there. And oh my God, what a difference it made to walleye fishing. So it's a really good tactic. It's difficult to do both physically and mentally, but if you can get onto it, it's gold. On any lake, Rice Lake, another great one for that. So, and
the nice thing about it is it works better with spinning than it does with bait casting. Yeah. That's why you can really do well with spinning gear if you do it right with braided lines. So
braided line, yeah.
So, I think that's about it, buddy. I think we should. I'm going to do 2 rapid fire questions for you. I wrote 2 down. Remember I did with Gord Peiser last week?
All right.
I'm going to give one or the other. I want Angelo's pick. Everybody here. I want Angelo Viola's opinion on this. Okay. Your top water popper. You're using a popper for top water. You only have 2 choices to work with for the rest of your life. Is it a black one or a white one?
White.
Why?
Confidence.
Okay.
Here's what you want me to tell you why. And you and I have debated this a million times on top water baits. All those beautiful patterns and all those wonderful colors and all that stuff there. That's for us.
Right.
That's not for the fish. Because the only thing that a fish could see from down below is what's on the bottom of the lure. And I want you to look at 99.9% of the top water baits that work. What color is that belly?
It's
belly.
White. It's white, for sure. Okay. Number 2, Angelo Viola. You can do one of 2 things for the rest of your life. You can either drop shot for smallmouth or go flipping for largemouth. Which do you do? I thought about this one. I knew that. I Peiser last week got a question too. I'm about to stop the chump questions.
Rest of my life.
Rest of your life. You can't do the other, buddy. You can't do it. You're gonna just stick with that.
I can't do that, and that's not.
You have to give an answer. You have to. You got to play the game. It's hypothetical. It'll never happen.
I got to go flipping for largemouth, I guess. If you're going to force me to make a decision, I got to go flipping for largemouth. How can you not?
That's what I wanted to hear. So a lot of people will say, "Yeah,
but you hurt me. You know that."
I know that. That's why I asked you. Thank you for those, buddy. That's all I had. Just a couple of questions. So.
All right. Well, I'll have a couple for you next week. How's that? Listen,
Perfect.
thanks everybody for joining us. If we didn't get to your question, it wasn't on purpose. We're going to go through them after we're done here, and anything that we can maybe bring up next week and work with you. We have a special guest coming up Friday. I'm not at liberty to tell you exactly who, but
Did he get back to you? Did he get back to you already today or no?
I can't say.
Okay.
But we will have a very special guest this Friday at noon.
Yeah.
And you don't want to miss that for sure. So
For sure. Thanks everybody for coming out. Very, very much appreciated. Hopefully you're getting along in this crazy time of the world. And that's why we're here today. And all these times is just to kind of get together as a group and chat with you guys and girls and have fun. So hopefully it's
stay safe. Stay safe, everybody. We'll talk to you on Friday. Take care.
Come on, leave your worries far behind where they belong, 'cause we're in for some good fishing. Yeah, they just bite now.